You are clearly the master of the primordial forbidden zone, having slumbered for hundreds of millions of years. Yet you have been mistaken for a mere beggar by these insignificant disciples of the Holy Land. Just when everyone believed you had perished, you casually used a single finger to cripple their leader. As your finger beam swept past, the peerlessly arrogant Li Yangshuan instantly froze in place. The arrogance on his face solidified. His dharma power was like a frozen river, and the soul aura he took such pride in lost its luster in a heartbeat. He let out a shriek of utter disbelief. You merely sighed lightly, your tone heavy with the exhaustion and sorrow of one disturbed from a deep ancient slumber. In an instant, the heavens and the earth went still. Every prodigy present, including the arrogant Li Yangshuan himself, became pinned in their lunging postures as if struck by an invisible wall, unable to move a muscle. The arrogance on his face froze instantly. Terror crept across his brow. His dharma power was like a frozen river, and the soul aura he took such pride in lost its luster in a heartbeat. Who is it? Who is playing God and Ghost? Come out and face my blade. Li Yangshuan roared, though his voice betrayed a trembling he could not suppress. You did not answer immediately, allowing the silence to stretch. Did you come here to knock on my door? Your voice was calm, yet it sounded as if a deity from the 9 heavens were looking down upon mere dust. I am the current holy son of the Zifu Holy Land, backed by an immortal lineage. Why do you block our path to the Tao? Li Yangshu struggled to maintain his courage as he shouted. Zifu Holy Land? You gave a faint chuckle. I remember now. The legacy founded by that junior who called himself the Zifu Great Emperor. Back then he knelt here begging for my guidance, but I dismissed him for his dull talent. He is long dead, yet his descendants now have the audacity to break into my domain. As these words left your lips, the minds of all the prodigies present were blown. The Zifu Great Emperor had knelt to beg for guidance, only to be mocked for his dull talent by you. Impossible. You are spouting nonsense. You are insulting our ancestor? Who on earth are you? Li Yangshuan roared with bloodshot eyes. Who am I? The disdain in your tone deepened. You are not even worthy of knowing my name. The moment the words fell, you casually flicked a finger, sending a beam of energy soaring slowly out from the deep, impenetrable darkness of the Forbidden Zone. That finger wind, though it appeared devoid of strength, completely sealed off every path of retreat for Li Yangxian. His status as a saint son, his imitation imperial weapon, and his heaven-defying cultivation all became nothing more than a laughingstock before you. No, Li Yangxian let out one final roar of unwillingness, the last sound he would ever utter in his life. In the very next second, your finger struck his glabella. There was no explosion, no shockwave. Li Yangxian, the self-proclaimed saint, was sent flying like a pebble flicked aside by a child. Turning into a streak of light, he was instantly blasted high into the sky. His entire cultivation was wiped clean, leaving him without even a shred of room to resist. A single finger to suppress a saint's son, shattering his cultivation and leaving him in absolute stillness. All the captured prodigies stared in shock, their eyes nearly bulging from their sockets. Their leader, the one they viewed as invincible, had been defeated by a single finger of yours. Fear instantly overwhelmed their remaining shreds of reason. Is there anyone else who wishes to knock on my door? Your voice resonated once more, and they began to beg for mercy in a frenzy. Their wailing cries shook the very heavens and the earth. Spare us. We were blind and dared to offend you. It was a moment of madness that led us to this path. We implore, Senior, consider how difficult it is to attain this level of cultivation and grant us a path to survival. You paid them no further heed, sinking back into a deep slumber, yet the immense pressure locking down the heavens and the earth did not diminish in the slightest. Just as they were on the brink of collapse, several incomparably powerful auras streaked across the distant horizon. What kind of coward dares to inflict such harm upon the saint son of our Zifu Holy Land? A furious roar echoed through the skies, causing the mountain range to tremble and rumble. 3 Saint King powerhouses, draped in purple robes embroidered with stars, descended. The Supreme Elder leading them wore a countenance as grim as a storm-tossed sea. He glared toward the depths of the silent Forbidden Zone and shouted at you with a cold, piercing voice. You head-hiding, tail-concealing rat. Come out here, for daring to injure the saint son of our Holy Land. Do you have any idea what kind of grave, unforgivable sin you have committed? The 3rd senior brother, why waste your breath on him? The saint son's life-soul jade slip has shattered. His cultivation is utterly destroyed. There is no doubt he is the one who dealt these cruel blows. Today we shall join forces to set up the Ziwei heaven-locking great array, seal this forbidden zone, and claim justice for our saint son. An elder with a fiery temperament stood upright and shouted, indeed a mere declining forbidden zone, dares to provoke the majesty of our Zifu Holy Land. The lead elder, a look of ferocity flashing in his eyes, nodded and said, very well, set the array. I want him to pay an agonizing price for what he has done. The 3 Saint Kings moved in unison to strike, muttering incantations under his breath. His hands wove intricate seals with lightning speed. Above the firmament, the winds shifted and clouds churned, while the starlight itself began to rotate. Trails of violet formation runes unfurled, weaving into a gargantuan net that eclipsed the heavens. enshrouding a radius of 100 miles. The Ziwei heaven-locking formation veiled the Sun-Moon Peak. The massive web descended, intending to utterly seal every entrance to the primordial forbidden zone. In the eyes of the trapped prodigies, a glimmer of hope for survival flickered back to life. 3 Saint Kings, 1 supreme killing formation. It seemed this time they were finally saved. Just as everyone believed the outcome was set in stone, an ancient, indifferent voice echoed once more. This time there was no reluctance, no scorn. There was only a chilling detachment toward everything. To manifest a formation in my place of slumber, dissipate. With only that single word, a command whispered from the depths of the forbidden zone, the laws of heaven and earth bent to his will, and then a scene of sheer terror unfolded. The Ziwei heaven-locking formation, established by the joint efforts of 3 Saint Kings and capable of sealing the heavens and Linhua Saints, that colossal violet net, forged from hundreds of millions of profound runes, upon hearing his command began to rapidly melt away. It was not destroyed by force, it simply vanished into nothingness. Every formation rune dissolved into the most primal spiritual energy, scattering into the world as if they had never existed at all. Puff! As the great formation shattered, the 3 grand elders of the Zifu Holy Land suffered a violent backlash. Their blood surged, and their faces turned deathly pale. This is impossible. My formation, my Dao techniques, why did they collapse on their own? The lead elder was overcome with disbelief, his voice trembling with an unprecedented fear. Even their very foundations of the Dao suffered irreparable damage. However, this was not the end. His cold, indifferent voice sounded once more, pronouncing the final verdict. Insulting this seat and attempting to seal my place of rest. Your crime is death. The moment the words fell, the bodies of the 3 proud, peerless Saint King elders suddenly began to turn transparent, without any warning. No, what is this power? My saint body, my cultivation base. They watched in horror as their cultivation and Dao foundations rapidly evaporated. They tried to struggle, tried to resist, only to find that their heaven-shaking Saint King cultivation was utterly minuscule and powerless before him. Beneath the gaze of the surrounding prodigies, who were frozen in absolute terror, the 3 grand elders of the Zifu Holy Land, figures who could shake the very foundation just like that, silently and inch by inch, his cultivation withered away, his Dao foundation collapsed, and having completely lost the ability to fight, he slumped to the ground. A profound silence descended upon heaven and earth. The few surviving geniuses stood there, their minds completely blank. Some were so terrified that their mental defenses shattered. Trembling uncontrollably, having witnessed a mere flick of a finger reduce a holy sun to a cripple, a single word broke their formation and defeated 3 kings. Just how terrifying is this level of cultivation? At this moment, the pressure that had been restraining them finally began to recede rapidly. Though they had regained their freedom, not a single one dared to flee. Everyone's legs turned to jelly. They fell to their knees in unison, frantically kowtowing toward the depths of the forbidden zone. They paid no mind, even as their foreheads struck the hard stone until they bled. Senior, spare us, we were wrong, we were truly wrong. After a long silence, your voice rang out one last time, filled with undisguised disgust. Begone, and tell those standing behind you. The master of the primordial forbidden zone has awakened. The news spread rapidly throughout the eastern wasteland. The holy son of the Purple Palace had his cultivation completely crippled. The Dao foundations of 3 Saint King Great Elders were shattered by your words alone. The news that the master of the primordial forbidden zone had awakened shook the sacred lands of every immortal lineage, sending shockwaves across the entire world. For hundreds of millions of years, no one had dared to tread deep into the primordial forbidden zone, yet it truly has a master, and furthermore, one who has awakened, to defeat 3 Saint Kings with a single word. Just how terrifying is such cultivation? Countless people speculated, and countless factions were gripped by terror. As for the Eye of the Storm itself, the Purple Palace Holy Land was filled with boundless rage, deeply intertwined with dread. Within the deliberation hall of the Purple Palace Holy Land, the atmosphere was suffocatingly heavy. How far must they go? Since the founding of our lineage, has the Purple Palace Holy Land ever suffered such humiliation? A hot-tempered elder roared at the top of his lungs. Our holy son has been crippled, and the Dao foundations of our 3 senior brothers have withered. If we do not avenge this grudge, how could our Purple Palace Holy Land ever hold its head high in the eastern wasteland again? But the strength of the adversary is unfathomable. To defeat 3 Saint King brothers with a single word, such methods are unheard of. If we were to rashly charge forward, I fear we would face disaster. Another more rational elder noted with a look of concern. What is there to fear? The previous elder shouted in indignation. Even if he is powerful, could he possibly withstand the accumulated heritage of our Zifu sacred land over several 100,000 years? Let us summon the sect's suppressing emperor weapon. Let us awaken the ancestors who slumber in the deep. For I refuse to believe that with the entire strength of our sect gathered, we cannot reclaim our justice. Once these words were spoken, the great hall fell into a brief moment of restless hesitation. To use an emperor weapon and disturb the ancestors is a gamble that risks the entirety of a sect's foundation. The Zifu Holy Master sat upon the highest throne, his eyes burning with madness and absolute determination. He slammed his hand against the armrest and said in a low, heavy voice, "Indeed, there is no path of retreat left for us. The tragedy of the Holy Sun and the three Supreme Elders has pushed our Zifu sacred land to the edge of the abyss. If we do not strike back with thunderous force, the people of this world will believe that the Zifu sacred land has become cowardly. My decree: strike the Zifu Dao bell, and summon all disciples and elders currently abroad. They must return to the sect within 3 days. Open the treasury, distribute all war artifacts, and dispense all divine elixirs and spiritual medicines. Most importantly, beseech the ancestors to come out of seclusion and awaken the Zifu Emperor Mirror. 3 days from now, our great army will descend to demand justice, for I want that masked coward to understand that, under the might of our Zifu sacred land, all insignificant insects will be made to pay the price." The decision of the Zifu Holy Master ignited the fighting spirit and fury of everyone present. The glory and dignity, built over hundreds of thousands of years, would not permit them to take a single step back. 3 days later, before the mountain gates of the Zifu sacred land, banners blocked out the sun. With killing intent piercing the heavens, tens of thousands of Zifu disciples formed a battle formation, coalescing into a purple Qilin that roared toward the sky. In the clouds, hundreds of massive warships radiated an overwhelming, torrential aura. Powerful elders and protectors stood at the vanguard of the army, alongside an emaciated old man whose aura was so withered that he was on the verge of passing away. Clutching an antique violet bronze mirror, he stood tall. This was the only remaining great sage-level ancestor of the Zifu sacred land, having slumbered for over 100,000 years, and the bronze mirror in his grasp was an imperial weapon, personally forged by the Zifu Great Emperor himself. At the command of the Zifu Sacred Lord, the Ziwei Imperial Mirror moved toward the Teichu Forbidden Zone, as the vast army surged forward, marching directly toward the heart of the restricted territory. Wherever they passed, the heavens lost their color and all living things prostrated. The entire Donghuang region turned its gaze toward this singular event. Everyone sought to witness the outcome of this collision between the immortal sacred land and this mysterious forbidden zone. The Taichu Forbidden Zone remained as it had for eternity, silent, cold, and steeped in darkness, as the army of the Zifu sacred land arrived at the gates, surrounding the perimeter of the Forbidden Zone until not even a drop of water could leak through. Before a simple thatched hut deep within the restricted grounds, you slowly opened your eyes, you raised your gaze, devoid of any emotion, indifferent and without a single ripple. In the blink of an eye, epochs shifted, and the universe itself underwent cycles of birth and destruction. You finally stood up. You were clad in simple white robes, your black hair draped over your shoulders, your appearance so handsome it seemed beyond that of a mortal. There was not a trace of spiritual power fluctuating within you, appearing as frail as a scholar who could not even trust a chicken, hiding away from the mortal world. You raised your head, glancing at the murderous army outside the Forbidden Zone, and the Ziwei Imperial Mirror hovering in midair, and upon feeling its faint, lingering imperial might, a look of disappointment crossed your face. Hundreds of millions of years have passed, yet the cultivators of this world remain as foolish as ever. You took a single step, and in a heartbeat, your figure appeared outside the Forbidden Zone, standing directly before the tens of thousands of soldiers of the Zifu sacred land. You stood there quietly and alone, forming a stark contrast to the massive legion that obscured the sky on the opposite side. Are you the master of the Forbidden Zone? The Zifu sacred lord looked at the young man, who had suddenly appeared, his heart shaken to its core. He could not discern how you had appeared at all. You did not answer him, merely fixing your gaze upon the great sage. You spoke, in consideration of how the young one from the Zifu sought the Tao back then, and given that he was sincere, I had already granted you all a chance, but now, that chance has come to an end. Arrogance. The great saint ancestor coughed up a mouthful of golden blood, and with all his strength, he propelled the Ziwei Emperor Mirror in his hands, unleashing a beam of imperial might, capable of piercing the heavens and the earth, directed straight at you. However, you merely reached out your hand and waved it gently toward that world-destroying beam of imperial light. With a motion of extreme indifference, the beam of light, along with the supreme laws contained within it, was instantly obliterated, vanishing without a trace. What? The great saint ancestor's eyes widened until they nearly fell from their sockets. You had extinguished an attack from an imperial weapon with your bare hands. Ignoring him, you looked up toward the direction of the Zifu Holy Land's mountain gate, gazing across the endless void before lifting your hand and pressing down casually in that direction. A thunderous roar erupted, a cataclysmic sound echoing from the distant reaches of space and time. Countless experts of the Eastern Wasteland who were observing the battle saw a sight through their various secret techniques and precious mirrors that they would never be able to forget. The Zifu Holy Land, which had stood for over 100,000 years, and was hailed as the pure land of the Eastern Wasteland, That magnificent dojo, composed of countless divine mountains and immortal islands, at this moment saw its protective grand formation shatter in an instant. The core restrictions of the mountain gate disintegrated completely. The spiritual veins of the entire dojo were thoroughly sealed, and every defensive measure was rendered useless. It was an act of suppression without even the slightest suspense, traversing the infinite void to press down casually, sealing an immortal holy land in one stroke. My sect, my Tao inheritance. The Zifu Holy Master, witnessing the images transmitted through the mirror, let out a heart-wrenching wail, his eyes bloodshot. The great saint ancestor stood as if struck by lightning, the Ziwei Emperor mirror slipping from his grasp to clang against the ground, as he pointed at you with trembling lips. Having remembered a name that existed only within the forbidden chapters of the most ancient scrolls, a name capable of sealing a Tao inheritance from across the void. This power. You are not a great emperor. You are the forbidden existence who severed the path to the throne, the one who prevented any great emperor from emerging throughout the eternal ages? Before the old man could finish his words, you cast a fleeting glance in his direction. Puff! This great saint ancestor, along with the tens of thousands of warships and battleships of his grand army behind him, under the weight of that single glance, felt their cultivation's base shatter entirely. Their fighting spirit dissipated into nothingness, leaving them collapsed upon the earth. An immortal holy land, from its disciples down to its ancestors, along with its very foundation and orthodoxy, had this day completely lost the ability to wage war. You withdrew your hand, clasping it behind your back. Your gaze did not linger on the battlefield, but pierced toward the depths of the sky. A cold smile appeared on your face. With a casual flick of your hand, you had erased a noisy insect, yet in doing so you had lured out the cowardly rats hiding in the shadows. Since you have all awakened, then come out one by one and play with me. The eastern wilderness was thrown into absolute turmoil. With a snap of your fingers, a saint's son was reduced to nothing. With a single word, 3 kings were defeated, a feat that struck a bone-chilling terror into the hearts of all. And the fact that you, separated by endless mountains and rivers, could casually press down your hand and effectively erase an immortal holy land with over 100,000 years of heritage from the map, was a display of absolute power that left every living soul breathless. All the experts who witnessed this earth-shattering spectacle stood frozen in place, their limbs icy with fear. That was not a battle, that was not mere destruction, it was erasure. Much like a painter who feels dissatisfied with a smudge on his canvas, you had simply wiped it away with a flick of your hand, clean and effortless, leaving behind not a trace of the world's conflict. The 2 prefecture Holy Land was now reduced to nothing more than a sealed mountain gate, stripped of every shred of its former glory. Within the ancient temple of the Yaoguang Holy Land, the atmosphere became heavy to the point of suffocation. Everyone watched as an elderly man with sparse, wispy hair, his teeth nearly all fallen out, spoke in a hoarse voice, his body trembling slightly, though none could tell if it was from the frailty of age or from sheer terror. The Ziwei Emperor mirror could not even stir a single ripple, and the emperor's might had been shattered by a bare hand. Another elder, a burly figure, swallowed hard, his face filled with dread. That was not just shattered. The master of the Yaoguang Holy Land, seated at the highest position, lost all color in her face as she spoke in a dry, raspy voice to correct him. That was annihilation. Total annihilation at the level of the laws themselves, as if that emperor's might had never existed in the first place. Once these words were spoken, everyone in the hall drew a sharp breath of cold air, such a method to seal an orthodoxy from such a distance. I remember now. The elderly man now Tsukinao felt an unprecedented terror erupt within his cloudy eyes. The elder seemed to recall a memory of the most terrifying nature. Stammering in shock, the sect's most ancient forbidden manuscript records that, in the final era of mythology, there existed a forbidden entity who clashed with the eternal great emperor, shaking the heavens and shattering the earth, disrupting his slumber, and with a single sword strike, he severed the path to the eternal emperor. From that moment on, there have been no new emperors in this world. The final page of the manuscript bears only 8 characters written in blood. Do not speak, do not look, do not contemplate, do not provoke. Boom. These words brought more shock than the leveling of the Zifu Holy Land. The notion of an entity who severed the emperor's path and prevented any great emperor from emerging throughout the ages was catastrophic. This revelation was so earth-shattering and horrific that even the Tao hearts of these ancient monsters, who have survived countless years, nearly crumbled. He is that very forbidden entity. The voice of the Yaoguang Holy Lord trembled with an irrepressible fear. That great saint ancestor of the Zifu Holy Land seemed to have screamed those same words before his demise. It is over, everything is finished. Such an entity has awakened, and furthermore has emerged into the world. To him, our so-called holy lands and noble families are likely nothing more than the Zifu Holy Land in his eyes, merely eyesores to be swept away. The terror spread like a plague through the high-level meeting of every top-tier orthodoxy. Meanwhile, above the former Zifu Holy Land, now a sealed expanse of land, countless cultivators gathered to investigate. They hovered in the sky, not daring to descend, observing with trepidation through various divine arts and precious mirrors. There is nothing left below. The core of the mountain-protecting formation has been completely erased. It is truly terrifying. I used the heaven-reverting mirror, yet I cannot trace even a single remnant. Everything related to the Zifu Holy Land appears to have been carved out of the river of time. Look at those who survived. Everyone's gaze instinctively shifted toward the distance. Those surviving prodigies were being retrieved by the elders of their respective sects, but their condition made everyone shudder with fear. Some had suffered a total mental collapse, while others saw their Tao hearts fractured. Even a successor of an ancient family, known for his unyielding temperament, was currently kneeling on his flying vessel, kowtowing incessantly toward the Taisuo Forbidden Zone. His forehead had long since turned raw and bloodied, yet he did not dare to stop. A flick of the finger to discard a holy sun, a single word to defeat 3 kings, a wave of the hand to pacify a holy land. This sequence of events had completely shattered the Tao heart. I fear that for the rest of this life, there will be no possibility of advancing even a single step further, just as the entire eastern wasteland descended into an eerie, terrifying silence, and every faction chose to cower, forbidding their disciples from coming within even a step of the Taishan Forbidden Zone. Unimaginable news arrived from the Western Desert. In the Holy Land of the Western Desert's Heavenly Eye sect, an old ancestor who had been in deep, withered meditation for 9 lifetimes, said to be only a single step away from the Tao ancestor realm, suddenly felt a blood stain crack open between his eyebrows, while in the midst of enlightenment, his golden body nearly crumbling to dust. He uttered only one sentence: "A powerhouse has emerged in the east. The era of chaos is upon us. We must join forces to protect our Tao." Almost simultaneously, in the southern ridge's Demon Emperor Palace, a pure-blooded golden crow that had slumbered for 100,000 years with ancestral bloodlines surged forth from the sacred fire of the sun, letting out a roar that shook the heavens and the earth. Demon might swept across the entirety of the southern ridge, his will spreading throughout the myriad demons. Masters, the human forbidden zone is far too arrogant. This is a golden opportunity for our demon race to rise. We are willing to assist our human counterparts in purging this individual. From an ancient tent forged of divine metal in the Northern Plains Golden family, a withered command was issued. The ancestors have signaled that the master of the Forbidden Zone is an ominous blight that will devour our clan's destiny. Assemble the Golden Blood Guards. Prepare to march south. The human emperor of the Central Plains Immortal Dynasty, clad in the 9-dragon imperial robe, stood upon the star observatory, gazing at the boiling aura in the east that struck terror into his heart. After a long silence, he finally spoke slowly. "You are the master of the Taishan Forbidden Zone. Your conduct is tyrannical, defying the heavens, and you are the common enemy of the world. In the name of the Central Plains Human Emperor, I summon the heroes of the world to establish a holy alliance and purge the Forbidden Zone." Command after command was issued from the 4 great regions beyond the eastern wasteland, spreading across the entire world in an instant. The world was in an uproar once more. No one expected that while the factions of the eastern wasteland were frightened into silence, shrinking away in fear, the premier powers of the western desert, the southern ridge, the northern plains, and the central plains, would react so violently, and coincidentally all choose to declare war. A storm sweeping across the entire continent was brewing at a speed far beyond what anyone had imagined. Yet the one responsible for all of this had just returned to his thatched cottage, settling back into his rocking chair. You watched the currents of aura intertwined with Tao essence, demon energy, wild blood, and imperial dragon chi gathering on the horizon. Your expression, without the slightest ripple of concern. He let out a yawn, clearly unimpressed. Finally, something of substance. "I hope you do not disappoint me too much." The palace floating among the clouds erupted into chaos. He had discovered them. Impossible. This location is concealed by the heavenly soul mirror. Even a divine sense at the emperor level should be unable to spy on us. Flee, run quickly. The masters of the 5 great powers, who were previously arrogant beyond measure, now bore no trace of their former composure. In its place was a terror that had seeped deep into their very marrow. The guardian divine beasts they had taken such pride in were not even considered toys in the eyes of their adversary. An existence of this caliber was fundamentally beyond their ability to resist. The human emperor of the central province reacted the fastest. He ruthlessly crushed a piece of jade talisman and roared with solemn authority, "Activate the heaven and earth great teleportation. Everyone, return to your respective sects immediately." The entire cloud palace emitted a violent spatial tremor. Countless arcane runes flared with light, preparing to tear through the void for a long-distance teleportation. However, the very moment the palace was set to vanish, a calm voice echoed deep within their hearts. "Did I say you could leave?" The moment those words fell, the heaven and earth great teleportation array, which had already been activated, was strangled as if by an invisible hand. All the spatial runes shattered simultaneously in an instant, turning into fine dust. The entire palace shuddered violently, forcibly dragged back from the void into reality. The teleportation had failed. How is this possible? The human emperor of the central province turned deathly pale. This was a life-saving trump card, crafted by the imperial dynasty at the cost of countless resources, yet it had been rendered useless by a single sentence. Panic spread as they frantically scanned their surroundings, attempting to locate the intruder. But there was nothing. The sky remained the same, the clouds remained unchanged, and the white-robed figure had not even appeared. Just as everyone was paralyzed by suspicion and dread, a sudden change occurred. The withered-looking ancestor from the western desert, who was preparing once more to condense the power of the Tao, suddenly saw that in the void before him, without the slightest warning, a single heavenly eye spirit leaf drifted down. The leaf was vibrant green and dew-kissed, its veins clearly visible, appearing entirely ordinary at first glance. Yet, when the old ancestor laid eyes upon it, it was as if he were staring at the most terrifying object in existence. The 9 layers of Tao halos behind his head flickered violently, and as he hurriedly chanted true mantras, a 10,000-foot-tall phantom of his Tao manifestation manifested behind him, reaching out to intercept the spiritual leaf. Yet the leaf, which appeared to flutter so lightly, disregarded the obstruction of the massive Tao manifestation and ignored the layers upon layers of Tao energy. It drifted effortlessly through every layer of defense and came to rest upon the old ancestor's glabella. At that very moment, all of the old ancestor's movements and expressions froze in place. The 10,000-foot Tao manifestation behind him began to crumble, grain by grain, like a statue made of sand. His golden body, condensed from 9 lifetimes of cultivation and heralded as indestructible, began to crack at the glabella. The fissures spread rapidly, blanketing his entire form in an instant. Crack! With a faint sound, the old ancestor of the Heavenly Eye sect, who hailed from the western desert and stood only a single step away from the Tao ancestor realm, fell before the horrified gazes of all present. His foundation collapsed, his entire cultivation was extinguished, and he slumped to the ground, utterly stripped of any ability to continue the battle. A gust of wind swept by, and the aura of Tao upon him vanished without a trace. His cultivation withered, leaving him no different from a common mortal. Old ancestor, old ancestor. The other high monks of the western desert within the palace let out cries of agony. But before their voices could fade, a voice devoid of the slightest emotional tremor, resonant with the weight of your will, echoed within everyone's mind. It was merely a single digit, yet it cast everyone in the palace into a frozen abyss. 1. You were counting. In the presence of all, you began a display of absolute dominance, counting down to their end. Madman, you are a madman. The figure shrouded in golden light from the Northern Plains golden family could no longer maintain his composure. He erupted with a thunderous roar, his golden radiance transforming into a blazing arc of light that tore through the firmament as he fled frantically in the opposite direction. He was fast to the absolute limit. As the master of the Frostbone Demon Lake, his true form was that of the Gang Metal Essence, possessing the greatest speed in the Northern Plains. However, at the very moment, just as the sun began to vanish beyond the horizon, across the 10,000-mile expanse of the clear blue sky, a minuscule dark cloud suddenly drifted into view. A single raindrop fell from within that cloud, and with unerring precision, it landed squarely upon that streak of golden light. It was as if red-hot iron had been plunged into ice. The indestructible golden aura, the moment it touched the raindrop, began to corrode. Massive patches of rust spread across his body at a speed that defied the laws of nature. No, my immortal golden body. A shrill, agonizing scream erupted from within the light, but it was all in vain. In a heartbeat, the golden radiance that had pierced the heavens transformed into a heap of rusted, fragile scrap metal, before finally crashing to the earth with a deafening clang. The path of metal had been shattered completely, his cultivation reduced to nothingness. Those 2 cold voices echoed once more, absolute and silent. The entire palace fell into a deathly stillness. If the first instance was a surprise attack, this second display was a raw crushing of space and natural laws. You have not even deigned to reveal yourself. Whose turn is it now? A great demon of the Southern Domain Demon Palace trembled, his teeth chattering uncontrollably. This was a question no one could answer. The agonizing anticipation of an unknown fate was 1,000 times more terrifying than the failure itself. The pressure, heavy as a towering mountain, weighed down upon the heart of every person present. At this very moment, the Central Plains human emperor, who had remained silent until now, felt a flicker of crazed resolve in his eyes. He turned sharply, seized a young eunuch who had been serving tea nearby, and with all his might, hurled him out of the palace. This man is the successor to the fortune of my Central Plains imperial dynasty. I am willing to sacrifice him to you, if only you will grant me a path to survival. He had actually chosen to trade another's future to preserve his own life. The young eunuch, his face still etched with bewilderment and terror, was cast out of the palace just like that. However, the anticipated punishment did not descend. The young eunuch tumbled through the air several times before landing safely upon the clouds, not a single hair harmed. Everyone in the palace was left in a state of stunned disbelief. You do not accept this sacrifice? The Central Plains human emperor was equally shocked, but a moment later, a greater, more overwhelming fear engulfed him. He felt as though someone had appeared directly behind him. He stiffened, turning his head inch by agonizing inch. A face, so handsome it seemed beyond that of any mortal, was mere inches away. It was the heartless, wicked you. No one knew when it appeared behind him. A single hand rested gently upon his shoulder, seeking to trade the future of another to purchase your own life. You gazed at him, a faint, inscrutable smile playing upon your face. That look in your eyes was not that of one observing a fellow human, but rather someone watching a curious insect. The lips of the Central Plains human emperor trembled. He could not even utter a coherent sentence. The entirety of the imperial dragon chi within his body, along with his entire cultivation base, was utterly frozen the moment your hand touched his shoulder. Ignoring his sheer terror, you raised your head, your gaze passing through him, to sweep across the high-ranking figures in the palace, who were already frightened out of their wits. You shook your head, as if feeling a sense of disappointment. You had intended toying with each of them, but it now seemed too slow and far too tedious, so you withdrew your hand. Then, beneath the bewildered gazes of all present, you slowly raised a finger and pointed toward the sky. Perhaps we should change to a new game. As your bells rumble, the entire sky suddenly plummeted into darkness. It was not obscured by storm clouds, nor was it the arrival of nightfall. Rather, in the boundless void of the ninth heaven, a colossal pitch-black fissure, unparalleled in scale, tore across the firmament of the entire eastern wasteland, and slowly began to open. Within that rift, there were no stars, no light, only the deepest void and chaos, enough to consume everything. It was as if the sky had been pierced by your hand, the entire dome of heaven shattered like black glass under your strike. That massive crack spanning the continent was less like an eye of the heavens, and more like the manifestation of your own will. A great power, impossible to describe in words, descended from the fissure, enveloping every individual within the palace above the clouds. This was no mere pressure, nor was it simple killing intent. It was a form of absolute suppression on the very essence of their life existence, as if a god were looking down upon trembling ants. A new game. Your voice resonated in the depths of everyone's hearts, calm and without a single ripple. Endure for the time it takes for one incense stick to burn beneath this heavenly scar. Whoever survives may leave. As the words finished, the immense power from the rift descended with a deafening roar. Inside the palace, save for the Central Plains human emperor and a few peak experts, the remaining attendants and guards could not even manage a groan, let alone a cry of resistance. They were instantly crushed, their blood surging until they lost consciousness, and their entire cultivation base scattered into the void. No, the few remaining titans let out screams of utter terror as they frantically channeled every ounce of their internal dharma power, unleashing their life-bound artifacts and manifesting their own domains. They fought desperately to resist the immense pressure descending from the heavens. The great demon of the Southern Ridge Demon Temple revealed its true form, blotting out the sun, yet was pressed down until its bones groaned and cracked, its demonic energy spilling out like a torrent. The immortal golden body of the Golden Clan's powerhouse was suddenly covered in spiderweb-like fissures. The Imperial Dragon Chi above the head of the Central Plains human emperor was compressed to its limit, flickering as if about to extinguish entirely. This was no longer a battle, it was a scene of absolute, one-sided annihilation. Just what kind of monster was he? A sense of despair spread through every heart. Yet, amidst the cacophony of screams and hopelessness, one figure stood in stark contrast. She was a woman draped in multicolored celestial robes, possessing a peerless countenance and an ethereal temperament. She was the chief saintess of the Central Plains ancestral temple, Ji Yaoguang. Legends say she was born with the nine-orifice exquisite immortal heart, naturally attuned to the heavenly Tao. At this moment, under a pressure sufficient to crush a saint, although her delicate body was trembling, and blood trickled from the corner of her mouth, her state was far superior to the others. A hazy layer of immortal light circulated around her, unexpectedly neutralizing the majority of the pressure. Chief Saintess Ji Yaoguang suddenly raised her head, her cold, clear gaze piercing through layers of void to look straight at you. Her tone carried a sense of innate arrogance and solemnity. You are powerful, but to act so domineering and unreasonable. Is there any difference between you and a devil? A true supreme existence should embrace the heavens and the earth, rather than finding amusement in crushing all living beings as you do. Your actions possess immense power, but you lack the heart of a great emperor. In the end, you are nothing but a false emperor. Her words rang out, resolute and uncompromising. The titans, who were still struggling to endure the pressure, stared at her with gazes akin to looking at a deity. At such a critical juncture, someone actually dared to lecture you, a being of unfathomable strength. On hearing this, your movements paused slightly, and you finally shifted your gaze from that small blade of grass, resting it upon Ji Yaoguang. You appraised her from head to toe, a peculiar smile appearing on your face. It was the expression of an adult watching a child attempt to sound mature, only to spout a string of naive remarks. You chuckled softly at the mention of the heart of a great emperor, shaking your head. Jiao Kuang raised her fair, delicate chin and spoke with defiance. I know. Is it not your desire to have all under heaven submit to your majesty? You're mistaken. If you spare me today, I will pledge in the name of the Central Province Ancestral Temple to honor you as the sovereign of the world, and cast divine statues in your image, so that you may enjoy eternal worship. Her words were heavy with temptation, yet after hearing them, the smile upon your face deepened, carrying with it even a hint of pity. After you finished speaking, leaving Jiao Kuang stunned, you remarked, your nine-orifice exquisite immortal heart makes you believe you can see through the human heart, and that you can control everything, do you not? You slowly stood up, and with a single step your figure appeared directly before Jiao Kuang. You extended a finger, gently tapping toward the center of Jiao Kuang's brow. That strike was deliberate, slow enough for Jiao Kuang to clearly see the whorls on your fingertip. She attempted to dodge, yet before this single finger of yours, all of time and space seemed to freeze. The talent you take such pride in, the one you consider a supreme Tao fruit. While your finger finally touched the center of her brow, you added, is nothing more than a slightly more beautiful toy. Since you are so fond of preaching the great Tao, you have no need to keep this toy any longer. A crisp chime rang out, and Jiao Kuang's entire body shuddered violently. She sensed something being forcibly extracted from within her. It was her foundation, the source of her pride, the nine-orifice exquisite immortal heart she was born with. Under your will, that brilliant divine immortal heart was actually being drawn out from her body, bit by bit. No, stop! Jiao Kuang let out a shrill, desolate scream, her beautiful face showing true terror for the very first time. The moment the immortal heart was extracted, her spiritual aura vanished, stripping away the grace that had once defined her. Within a few short breaths, a transcendent sense was reduced to an ordinary woman, her cultivation entirely lost. You withdrew your finger, and at your fingertip, the nine-colored phantom of the heart slowly dissipated. You did not even glance at Jiao Kuang, who had collapsed onto the ground in a stupor, but instead swept your gaze over the other titans, who were now paralyzed with absolute fear. You spoke in a calm voice. Is there anyone else who wishes to teach me how to conduct myself? Within the palace atop the clouds, the silence was absolute, like the stillness of death. Every gaze was fixated upon the figure lying paralyzed on the ground, the once peerless immortal maiden, now reduced to a mere mortal. A sense of horror gripped every heart like a cold, tightening hand. This was Jiao Kuang, bearer of the nine-orifice exquisite immortal heart, hailed as the genius with the greatest hope of attaining the Tao in 10,000 ages. Yet before you, she did not even have the chance to resist. Effortlessly stripped of her Tao foundation in a few fleeting moments, cast down into the mortal dust, such a method was far more difficult for her to accept than death itself. Devil, you are a devil. The human emperor of the Central Plains trembled from head to toe. He looked at you, standing within arm's reach. The imperial majesty once in his eyes had long since vanished, leaving behind only the most primal terror. He finally understood what kind of existence he had provoked. This was not a cultivator, not a great emperor. This was a powerhouse beyond all concepts and laws, one that could not be understood by ordinary reason. Their so-called alliance of sacred lands, their so-called punitive army, were nothing more than a laughable farce in your eyes from the very beginning. You ignored his frantic screams and lowered your gaze to glance at your own hands. Seemingly dissatisfied with the sensation of extracting the immortal heart just now, you frowned at how fragile it was, then shook your head, seemingly having lost all patience with this prolonged game. Enough, I tire of this. You raised your head to look toward the colossal fissure in the sky. Let it all end. As your words fell, the fissure that spanned the firmament suddenly trembled. What was once merely an invisible force exerting pressure suddenly underwent a fundamental shift in nature, and an infinite gravitational pull erupted from within the rift. My cultivation base, the great demon of the Southern Ridge Demon Palace, let out a cry of panic. He suddenly discovered that the vast demonic energy he had cultivated for hundreds of thousands of years was uncontrollably gushing out from his 7 orifices, transforming into streaks of vibrant, colorful mist, was drawn into the fissure within the heavens. It was not just him. The totality of their spiritual power, their divine souls, and the very essence of their life force, even the celestial palace itself, forged from countless treasures of heaven and earth, began to tear apart under the weight of that terrifying gravitational pull. The immortal gold and divine jade dissolved into the purest primordial spiritual energy. The formations and inscriptions disintegrated into their most fundamental laws, and even the celestial soul sphere, capable of concealing the heavenly secrets, could only struggle for a fleeting moment before emitting a mournful cry. Its surface shattered, transforming into a streak of light as it was consumed by the rift. This was a gluttonous feast you orchestrated for yourself, a grand pillaging targeting the peak power of the entire sacred alliance. No, spare my life, Senior. Please spare me. I am willing to submit to the Golden Clan. I will serve as your slave for eternity. I only ask that you show mercy. Cries for mercy and desperate wails merged into a cacophony of despair. Yet, your expression remained entirely unmoved. What you desired was never their submission. You simply found them to be too noisy, and found their very presence an eyesore. What you sought to accomplish now was to erase these eyesores, along with every trace of their existence. For when one pulls weeds, one must remove them by the root. My dynasty, my national fortune. The human emperor of Central Plains let out a final tragic scream. He could clearly feel the dragon vein of his dynasty being frantically devoured by that fissure, its essence drained away. That was the foundation of the Central Plains dynasty, built over 1,000,000 years. His imperial dragon Shi, his indestructible golden body, and his sovereign soul, all of it stood before this irresistible force, transforming into a colossal pillar of golden light that surged toward the heavens, plunging deep into the fathomless darkness. In his final moments, he saw that white-clad figure still standing with hands clasped behind his back, standing in silent composure, as if this world-ending catastrophe unfolding before his eyes were truly nothing more than a trivial game. Madman. These were the final 2 words, in an instant the palace fell into absolute silence. Every great master, along with the resplendent palace itself, had been completely devoured. All that remained were the icebone demon fox, now reduced to a common tabby cat, and the pure-blooded golden crow, transformed into a mere black raven. The idol remained trembling violently in place, alongside the hollow shell of the dragon vein that had been thoroughly drained of its essence. The Keelan sacred beast knelt upon the ground, begging for its life. They had survived this devouring only because their own cultivation had already been shattered by your hand. Having consumed everything in its path, the fissure in the heavens began to slowly close. The entire world returned to a state of stillness. You brushed off your hands as if you had merely finished a trivial task of no consequence. You glanced at the dazed creatures, appearing somewhat irritated, and waved them away with a dismissive, begone. In the next moment, the tabby cat, the black raven, the idol, and the Keelan sacred beast, together with the dragon vein husk suspended in the sky, were instantly enveloped by an irresistible force. They were cast through the torn void, flung directly back to their respective homelands. One could only imagine the expressions that would dawn upon the cultivators of the northern plains, southern ridge, western desert, and central plains, when they saw their own guardian sacred beasts return in such a pathetic state. Their countenances would surely be a sight to behold. Having completed these tasks, your figure flickered and vanished from the spot, as if nothing had ever occurred. When you appeared once more, you had returned to the Taichu Forbidden Zone, standing before your humble thatched hut. The bloodshed and the earth-shattering chaos that transpired outside were to you nothing more than passing clouds. You returned to your rocking chair and glanced at the small blade of grass that had been disturbed. Its leaves were still slightly curled, appearing listless and weary. Your brows furrowed. You reached out your hand, palm facing upward. In the very next moment, an orb of brilliant iridescent energy manifested in your palm. This sphere contained the Tao charm of the Tianyan sect, the primal demonic energy of the demon race, the essence of Geng metal from the Golden Family, and the imperial dragon Qi of the Central Plains dynasty. These were the essences you had meticulously extracted from the masters of the Holy Land Alliance. Even a single leaked wisp of this power would be enough to incite a storm of slaughter or cultivate an peerless expert. Yet, in your hands, it was nothing more than a lump of clay to be molded at will. You studied the energy orb, appearing somewhat displeased by its impurities. With a casual flick of your wrist, you purged the brutal, chaotic energies within, such as the demonic aura and the Geng metal essence, tossing them into the infinite darkness of the Forbidden Zone, as if they were mere refuse. You kept only the most refined essence. This included the Taoist charm accumulated over 9 lifetimes by the ancestor of the Western Desert's Tianyan sect, and the imperial dragon Qi gathered from thousands of miles of the Central Plains mountains and rivers. Then you slowly infused these 2 energies, the most supreme in the world, into the roots of the small blade of grass before you. You performed these actions with the natural, casual ease of a common gardener tending to his flowers. Nourished by these 2 supreme energies, that seemingly ordinary blade of grass erupted in an instant with a light of blinding brilliance. The leaf, previously curled, unfurled with a sharp snap. Upon the verdant surface floated countless mystical patterns, as if explaining the deepest, most fundamental truths of the great Tao of heaven and earth. A surge of vitality, beyond description in mere words, burst forth from the front of the thatched cottage, and rapidly swept across the entire Taichu Forbidden Zone, this desolate, deathly silent, forbidden region, a place where even light struggled to penetrate, began to undergo a transformation visible to the naked eye. Across the cracked, blackened earth, tender green grass sprouts began to pierce the soil. Ancient trees, withered for 10,000 years, unexpectedly put forth fresh branches. Even the dried-up riverbeds began to flow with clear, gushing spring water. The babbling water carried with it an intense aura of life. In a mere moment, the Taichu Forbidden Zone, a place known as a death trap for all living things, with the thatched cottage as its epicenter, was forcibly transformed into an earthly paradise spanning 100 miles. Immortal mists swirled, auspicious clouds gathered in their thousands, and rare flowers and exotic herbs bloomed in every corner. This place was no longer a forbidden zone of death. It was undeniably a supreme celestial realm, one that would make even the gods burn with envy. You looked upon everything before you, nodding in satisfaction, thinking that this was much more pleasing to the eye. You felt that the garden behind your home should look precisely like this. Having finished these tasks, you seemed to remember something else. You reached out once more, and an ancient bronze mirror appeared in your palm. It was the heavenly mystery celestial instrument you had confiscated from the Holy Land Alliance. This was a supreme treasure capable of obscuring the heavens, one that even a great emperor would find impossible to divine. Yet in your hands it seemed nothing more than a common plaything. You held the heavenly mystery celestial instrument, twirling it idly before your thatched cottage, and then you committed an act that would cause any cultivator who witnessed it to vomit blood in anguish. Crack. You crushed the heavenly mystery celestial instrument directly. Then, you scattered the fragments of this supreme treasure, along with the laws of heavenly obscuration contained within them, casually tossing them around the perimeter of the thatched hut. From this day forth, this humble cottage would vanish completely from the rivers of causality, space, time, and worldly fate. Even if a true supreme existence were to descend, they would be unable to perceive even a single inch of this place. Finally, some peace and quiet. You clap your hands, lean back into your rocking chair, and stretch comfortably. Yet just as you are about to close your eyes for another nap, the small blade of grass, satiated with silver energy, suddenly trembles. A pristine newborn leaf, no larger than a fingernail, slowly unfurls from its tip. Unlike the emerald green of the other leaves, this delicate sprout displays a chaotic array of colors. Upon the leaf's surface, it is as if countless stars are being born and extinguished, as if eras are in constant flux. Even more eerie is the center of the leaf, where an ancient rune, incomprehensible to any living soul, seems to contain all the mysteries of the heavens and earth, slowly taking shape. Your movements suddenly freeze, and your eyes, which have remained as calm and stagnant as an ancient well for millions of years, reveal for the first time a flicker of genuine astonishment. You stare intensely at the young, chaotic leaf and the rune materializing upon it. At this moment, your lips part slightly, as you seem to recall something that, even to you, proved to be a burdensome obstacle, long since buried beneath the deepest abyss of time. The very moment the rune fully solidifies, an invisible tremor ripples outward with the chaotic leaf as its epicenter. It ignores the barriers of space and time. It ignores the obfuscation of the heavenly soul reflection instrument, transmitting directly through the past and future, propagating throughout the myriad heavens and worlds. You glare at the chaotic leaf, and the rune slowly coalescing upon it, and the indifference you have maintained for countless eras is finally fractured. A flicker of emotion, unfamiliar even to yourself, flashes deep within your pupils. Not fear, but a profound sense of reminiscence mixed with an intense disgust at being disturbed. Why did you have to emerge here? You mutter, your voice so low that only you can hear it. Instinctively, you raise your hand, your fingers splayed as if you intended to use your will, a will capable of reshaping the heavens. Wipe away that leaf and its rune entirely, removing them completely from the tapestry of causality. Yet your hand stops halfway, then remains motionless. It is too late. The invisible tremor has already been unleashed, like a pebble cast into the stagnant pool known as the myriad heavens and worlds, and the ripples it has generated have already surged far beyond the confines of your small garden. The expression on your face returned to its customary tranquility, yet beneath that stillness lay a lingering haze that could not be dispelled. You lay back down upon the rocking chair once more, closing your eyes, seemingly intending to turn a blind eye to the world, but the entire world, stirred by that tremors you could not perceive, had thoroughly awakened. Wishu, the most ancient forbidden land, the most mysterious place throughout the eternal ages. Here there is no life, no light, only infinite silence in the void. At the bottom of the deep abyss, piled high with the remains of countless cosmic entities, an ancient jet-black coffin had lain in silence for 1,000,000 years. The surface of the coffin was carved with primitive, long-lost characters, every stroke containing the supreme laws of death and finality. Crack, a faint splintering sound, which in this absolute silence was deafeningly sharp. A fissure appeared upon the coffin lid, and immediately thereafter a deathly pale, withered hand, with fingernails several feet long, thrust violently from the gap, gripping the edge of the coffin with immense force. A distant hoarse sigh echoed from within the coffin. That voice seemed to have traversed the slumber of countless dimensions, carrying the confusion and disorientation of one newly awakened. The heavens have cracked. The owner of that hand seemed to sense the celestial fissure you had left behind not long ago. That aura of destruction stirred within him a trace of unease. But in the next moment, as the invisible tremor triggered by the chaos leaf swept through this place, that unease instantly transformed into terror. The entire ancient coffin exploded violently. A shriveled figure clad in tattered imperial robes surged up from within. He possessed no flesh or blood, only a skeleton radiating an ominous aura. Within his empty eye sockets, 2 pale green ghost fires flickered violently. This aura, how could it be? Was he not long since forgotten? Aim. Who has awakened him? The furious roar manifested into a physical storm of death, sweeping across the entirety of the Gishu abyss. The burial emperor tomb lies in the deepest reaches of the eastern wasteland continent, a place where, according to legend, all the supreme great emperors who failed to ascend are buried, having ultimately perished here since the primordial era. At the center of the tomb garden stands not a grave, but a solitary, eternal dragon throne forged from a single pristine piece of chaos immortal gold. At this moment, that dragon throne, symbolizing supreme imperial authority, was trembling violently. Numerous vague, indistinct phantoms, each exuding heaven-shaking imperial might, manifested around the throne. They emitted roars of either fury or bewilderment, or harboring taboos, against any who dare to disturb our slumber. The source of this tremor is the Taichu Forbidden Zone, and it is coming from that very direction. Not long ago, the dragon vein of the central province seemed to disintegrate in that exact place. This tremor is unlike the others. It is more ancient, more primordial, and it is shaking the Tao fruits we have left behind in this world. We shall join forces to investigate. Indeed, anyone who dares to shake the foundations of this world must pay the price. The Sea of Reincarnation, a gray expanse perpetually shrouded in mist. Legend says this place is the boundary between life and death. At the end of time, a ghost ship composed of countless dried bones drifts eternally upon the surface, never docking at the shore nor setting sail for distant lands. Yet today, this ghost ship has begun to move. The soul fire within the eyes of the giant, single-eyed skull on the bow ignited, casting its gaze toward the mainland for the first time. A vague, androgynous voice emanated from deep within the vessel's hold. Interesting. The cruel elegy of the old era, the prelude to the new era. The one in the Taichu Forbidden Zone is finally unwilling to remain in solitude. Is he attempting to overturn the board? Very well. Let us see how you intend to play this game of chess. In a short span of time, not only the Guishu, but the Burial Emperor Ridge, the Sea of Reincarnation, the Myriad Demon Grotto, the God Demon Well, and the Fallen Immortal Cliff, every forbidden zone of life long forgotten by the world, existing only in the most ancient of mythical legends, all manifested strange disturbances at the very same moment. Willpower so overwhelming that even a Saint King would feel despair traverse the boundless void, beginning to communicate across the 9 heavens. The Taichu Forbidden Zone has changed. We are all familiar with that power. It should not have appeared. He has gone too far. We cannot allow him to act recklessly any longer. If he loses control, this entire world will be buried alongside him. Agreed. We can no longer remain in deep slumber. We must join forces to pay a visit to this neighbor of ours. From the peak of Mount Bujo to the grand schemes of old, wills capable of crushing eternity reached a consensus. Yet the one who initiated all of this merely turned on his rocking chair, seemingly devoid of any interest in the guests about to arrive, feeling only that it was somewhat noisy. A pack of old fossils who cannot wake from their sleep, yet they still wish to meddle and seek amusement. With a hint of impatience, you muttered a word, casually pulled a plantain leaf from the side to cover your face, and closed your eyes in indifference. Mount Bujo, the legendary divine mountain said to uphold the heavens and earth, even though it was severed countless eons ago, yet the summit remains the highest point of this world. Floating above the 9 heavens gale and shrouded in chaotic energy throughout the year, this place is the closest one can get to the heavens. Within the distorted space, a figure draped in the shimmering light of 10,000 stars appeared. His features obscured, he was the first to manifest upon the summit. An aura of ancient desolation radiated from his body, as if he had existed since the birth of the very first stars, surviving until this present day. Immediately thereafter, another figure emerged. It was an elderly man with a hunched frame, leaning upon a staff of withered wood. With every step he took, countless lives appeared to cycle through birth and death beneath his feet, overflowing with the karmic laws of the great Tao. Following this, a third, then a fourth figure appeared. In less time than it takes for a single incense stick to burn, the peak of Mount Bujo had gathered 7 or 8 figures. Every one of them was a supreme entity who had slumbered for countless eons within their own forbidden zones, beings capable of sinking entire continents with a single stomp. Yet today, they had gathered here for a shared purpose. Is the Taoist from the Abyss of Return still as arrogant as ever? The elder with the wooden staff glanced at the figure shrouded in the aura of death, his voice calm and composed. Has the master of the Samsara Sea not also stepped onto dry land himself? The withered bone emperor from the Abyss of Return emitted a laugh that sounded like scraping metal. If not the reappearance of that presence, I fear we would have remained in slumber for several more epochs. A demon god, his entire body wreathed in demonic flames as if emerging from the deepest depths of hell, let out a cold snort, shattering the facade of their hollow pleasantries. Enough chatter, everyone. The one from the primal forbidden zone has completely lost his mind. On one hand, he toys with the Sacred Alliance, and on the other, he risks awakening that thing. If we continue to sit idly by, the next to be annihilated may well be our own forbidden zones. As these words were spoken, the atmosphere in the void instantly grew heavy. They were all existences standing at the pinnacle of the world, each possessing their own pride and dignity. But standing before that mysterious entity, the one who caused the highest echelon of the entire sacred alliance to wither away without even deigning to show his face, even they were forced to cast aside their pride and choose to join forces. Taoist. Suddenly the eyes of everyone present converged upon an elderly man with hair like crane feathers and the complexion of a youth, possessing the air of an immortal and clad in a Taoist robe adorned with the 8 trigrams. Among the masters of the Forbidden Zones, this Santian Daoran had not lived the longest, yet his seniority was exceptionally high. He possessed the peerless art of deducing the great Tao, claiming to discern both the past and the future, and held significant prestige among his peers. Santian Daoran stroked his long beard, his eyes half closed as his fingers rapidly pinched in calculation, seemingly tracing the trajectory of the great Tao. A moment later, he suddenly opened his eyes wide, a look of uncertainty crossing his face. Strange, truly strange. The great Tao is in a state of absolute chaos. I cannot calculate anything. The identity of this existence seems to have no place within this river of time. What? As these words fell, the masters of the Forbidden Zones were stunned. Even Santian Daoran was unable to calculate his origin. However, Santian Daoran continued. While I cannot deduce his origins, I can affirm that he is currently in a period of weakness, unlike any he has ever experienced. A period of weakness? Correct. Golden light flickered in the eyes of Santian Daoran. He forcibly tore down the scar of heaven, and awakening that object surely exacted a monumental price. This is a divine opportunity for us to strike. His words were brimming with confidence and incitement, causing the other Forbidden Zone masters to show signs of hesitation shifting toward action. Very well, if that is the case, let us cast our spell together. Let us first peer into his true state. The skeletal sovereign of the Return to Ruin decided swiftly. In an instant, 7 or 8 masters of the Forbidden Zones acted in unison. The laws of death, the path of reincarnation, the primal essence of stars and primordial demonic chi. Forces of terror capable of rending the heavens and shattering the earth were condensed together, manifesting as a massive, towering, precious mirror that reached toward the heavens. The mirror's light pierced through the infinite void, projecting directly toward the Forbidden Zone of the primordial beginning. They acted with extreme caution. Rather than spying directly on the individual, they focused their target on the humble thatched cottage. Within the mirror's reflection, the shape of the cottage slowly emerged. A rocking chair, a blade of grass, and a figure in white robes fast asleep, covered by a plantain leaf. It is him. He is indeed sleeping. It seems the words of fellow Taoist Santian were not exaggerated. However, the very moment they clearly perceived the figure, Santian Daoran, who had remained full of confidence, suddenly staggered, and the color drained from his face instantly. Those eyes, hailed for their ability to perceive the mysteries of heaven, were now widened wider than bronze bells. Their eyes were filled with disbelief and horror that penetrated to the very marrow of their bones. "Whoa, this is impossible." The old man's lips trembled violently, his teeth chattering uncontrollably. Why is it him? How could he still be alive? His piercing shriek left the other masters of the Forbidden Lands frozen in their tracks. Santian Daoran, do you know him? I do. Santian Daoran let out a miserable, ragged laugh that sounded more wretched than a cry. His body recoiled beyond his control, stepping backward as if he had just witnessed the most terrifying sight in existence. A nightmare, a memory he had buried for 3,000 years, rushed back into his mind with a maddening intensity. 3,000 years ago, he was merely a fledgling cultivator, full of vigor, and convinced he was a peerless genius. By chance, he had wandered into the outer reaches of the Taichu Forbidden Land, where he stumbled upon a young man in white robes skipping stones by a pond. Seeing the young man's extraordinary aura, he stepped forward to discuss the Tao. The result was that the tens of thousands of techniques he had always prided himself on were dismissed by the youth as worthless. The young man had casually picked up a stone, telling him that his path was fundamentally flawed. Then, using that very stone, the youth demonstrated the supreme simplicity of the great Tao. With just a single glance, he had fallen into a state of profound enlightenment. His cultivation progressed at a staggering speed, eventually giving rise to the Santian Daoran of today. He had always revered that young man as his guiding mentor, a prehistoric existence beyond all imagination. Never in his wildest dreams did he think that the person they had come to crusade against today was that very being. "Everyone, listen to my words," Santian Daoran shouted with a raspy, strained voice. "We must leave now, immediately. Let us pretend we were never here. That place is not a realm we are meant to tread. The individual is a taboo among taboos." However, to the other masters of the Forbidden Lands, his urgent warning took on an entirely different meaning. Santian Daoran, what is the meaning of this? The skeletal emperor of Guishu let out a cold laugh. Are you trying to frighten us into retreating so that you may seize the opportunity for yourself? Indeed, if he is currently in a weakened state, this is the perfect moment for us to plunder his Tao fruit. The demon god joined in, echoing the sentiment. They fundamentally could not grasp the depths of Sanqian Daoran's fear, assuming instead that he had been consumed by greed. No, you don't understand. You have no idea who he is. Sanqian Doran was on the verge of madness from his desperation. But it was already too late. The skeletal emperor of Guishu took a step forward, his chilling, murderous intent locked firmly onto the direction of the Taichu Forbidden Land. Either you join us, or I shall send you on your way right now. The chilling threat left Taoist Sanqian feeling as if he had been plunged into an icy abyss. Watching these fellow Taoists, their vision clouded by insatiable greed, an endless sense of despair welled up in his heart. It is over. Everything is finished. The space at the edge of the Taichu Forbidden Zone twisted violently. 7 or 8 figures, radiating heaven-shaking ferocity, tore through the void and descended upon this place. Their auras coalesced into a single expanse, forming a thick, dark cloud that blanketed the entire sky. The laws of heaven groaned, and the great Tao itself seemed to recede. Their mere arrival caused the outskirts of the Forbidden Zone, which had only just begun to recover a glimmer of vitality, to sink once more into absolute silence. Yet, not far ahead of them, in that newly revealed sanctuary of peach blossoms, everything remained as it was. The celestial mist still lingered. An auspicious energy flowed in abundance. A figure in white robes stood with his hands behind his back, positioned before a thatched hut, as if he had been waiting for a long time. The banana leaf that had been covering your face was cast aside, and your strikingly handsome features, far beyond those of any mortal, bore a look of undisguised impatience. You have arrived? You lifted your eyelids, scanning them with a single glance. That gaze was indifferent, as if you were merely observing a pack of stray dogs that had trespassed and trampled upon your lawn. The sovereign of withered bones from the return to ruin, acting as the instigator of this endeavor, stepped forward, and within his hollow eye sockets, 2 pale green ghostly flames flickered violently as he assessed you. He could not sense any powerful fluctuations of spiritual energy from your body. You appeared as an ordinary mortal, yet this only heightened his vigilance, an aura of returning to simplicity and truth. Are you the master of the Taichu Forbidden Zone? The sovereign of withered bones' voice carried the unique rhythm of death laws, as if it could drain the very life force of any who heard it. What is your business? You spoke with concise brevity. The sovereign of withered bones let out a cold snort, his imperial robes billowing without a breeze. Your actions are far too tyrannical, Excellency. You have shattered the foundations of holy lands and disrupted the order of the great Tao. Now, you awaken taboo artifacts. Do you intend to stand against the entire world? We have slumbered for eons, with our hearts set solely on the path to the supreme imperial throne. Your actions have severely disrupted the order of heaven and earth. He spoke these words with an air of righteousness, wrapping his own greed in the mantle of protecting the moral order of heaven and earth. Taoist Sanqian stood at the very back. Upon hearing the phrase opportunity to reach the Emperor Realm, his legs went weak, and he nearly collapsed to his knees. To discuss the path to the Emperor Realm before such a being, is this not akin to boasting of one's swimming skills in the presence of the Dragon King? As expected, you were momentarily stunned upon hearing this, but immediately after, you broke into laughter. A laugh that welled up from the very depths of your soul, finding it utterly absurd and laughable. Reaching the Emperor Realm, it was as if you had just heard the greatest joke in the world. You shook your head, then proceeded in a tone reminiscent of someone recalling an old tale, continuing to yourself. The last time I heard those 2 words, it seems, well, I have forgotten how many eons ago that was. Back then, there was a little fellow who claimed to be a descendant of the sun divine bird, and he too had those words hanging on his lips every single day. Later, finding him far too noisy, I plucked all his feathers and turned them into a feather duster. It proved quite useful. As soon as these words were spoken, the expressions of all the Forbidden Zone masters present changed simultaneously. The sun divine bird, was that not the legendary first demon emperor of the demon race? You paid no heed to their expressions, and continued at a leisurely pace. That's right. There was also a chaos true dragon who claimed to possess the most noble bloodline, invulnerable to all laws. He blocked the entrance to my dwelling, kowtowing for 30,000 years, begging me to take him in as a mount, just so I would take him to see the world, and witness what the true landscape of the Emperor Realm looked like. Regrettably, I found him too hideous, and his scales lacked beauty, so I sent him away. As for those you call great emperors, you paused here for a moment. Your gaze swept across every Forbidden Zone master present, your eyes filled with nothing but pity. I have also met a few who stood before me. They did not even dare to breathe too loudly, standing there with the utmost reverence, merely begging me to let a sliver of insight slip through my fingernails for them. Your voice was not loud, yet it struck like a heavy bell, reverberating deep within the hearts of all the Forbidden Zone masters. Taoist Sanqian was trembling uncontrollably, for he knew that every word spoken was the absolute truth. Finally, your gaze settled on the leader, the skeleton emperor. The smile on your face vanished completely, replaced by an endless, chilling indifference. A bunch of things like you, who have just crawled out from the earth before the lids of your coffins have even warmed up, dare to speak of becoming an emperor in my presence? Boom! This sentence struck like a bolt of divine lightning from the 9 heavens, exploding in the minds of all the arrogant Forbidden Zone masters. It was a level of arrogance they had never witnessed before. You seek death. The Skeleton Emperor was thoroughly enraged. He was a supreme emperor who had attained the Tao through slaughter during the primordial era. Having been buried in the Return to Ruins after his death and transformed into a Forbidden Zone master, he had never suffered such humiliation in his life. Accept your death, he roared in a fit of fury. Suddenly, he extended those withered, skeletal claws. In the blink of an eye, the entire world drained of all color. The infinite laws of death manifested as obsidian chains erupting from the void. They lashed out towards you, intent on dragging your soul, your true spirit, and the very concept of your existence into eternal oblivion. This was his most powerful divine ability, the Hand of Returning Ruins. Facing a strike capable of making even a great emperor turn pale, you did not even blink. You merely extended a single finger and tapped lightly toward the overwhelming, sky-filling chains of death. Your Tao is far too noisy. There was no heaven-shaking collision. Those violent chains of death came to a sudden, absolute halt 3 feet from your body. Then, under the horrified gaze of the skeletal emperor, all the chains reversed their trajectory. Moving 10 times faster than they had arrived, they plummeted toward their master. No, this is impossible. How could my own laws? The skeletal emperor let out a shrill, desolate scream. He desperately tried to resist and evade, but he discovered with terror that the laws of death he once took pride in no longer obeyed his command. Or rather, the supreme authority over the concept of death in this realm had been forcibly usurped by that man at this very moment. Thud thud. Countless death chains ruthlessly impaled his body. A frame he had boasted was indestructible for 10,000 kalpas. Massive patches of black corrosion spread across his bones, visible to the naked eye. His power, his core essence, and the very meaning of his existence were being maniacally eroded by his own strength. With a final, agonizing cry filled with reluctance and despair, this master of the Forbidden Zone from the ruins of return vanished before the eyes of all present. Inch by inch he collapsed, his Tao foundation utterly destroyed. His entire cultivation base dissipated completely. He slumped to the ground, rendered powerless, leaving behind not even a trace of his former self. For a moment the peak of Mount Buzhou fell into a deathly silence. The remaining masters of the Forbidden Zone stood frozen, as if plunged into an icy abyss. You withdrew your finger, blowing away a speck of dust that did not truly exist. You looked up at the old monsters who were now stunned into speechlessness, your face returning to that same look of bored indifference. You extended a finger and pointed casually at one of them. Next, you uttered your finger, then sweeping across every one of them. Or perhaps you should all come at once? I will give you 3 breaths to decide. 3 breaths. To a mere mortal, these are but 3 fleeting moments of respiration. But for these masters of the Forbidden Zones, who have endured for countless tens of thousands of years, these 3 breaths felt as agonizingly long as an entire epoch. Every breath was a torment that tore at their spirits and carved into their very bones. Your command for them to choose within 3 breaths was not a choice. It was a death sentence. To attack all at once was to be like moths drawn to a flame, courting their own annihilation. To attack one by one was simply lining up for judgment, awaiting the inevitable end. The boundary between life and death had never been this clear, yet never this fragile. Time expired, and then a roar, suppressed to the absolute limit, shattered the frozen void. It was not a plea for mercy, nor a sign of submission, but a desperate, maddened counterattack from those cornered in a hopeless plight. The demon god, his body wreathed in demonic flames, as if stepping forth from the deepest abyss of hell, had chosen to attack at once. The demonic flames upon him were no longer the violent black of before, but had morphed into a deathly, ashen gray. It was a strike of supreme power, unleashed only after he had incinerated his own essence. He sacrificed his entire demonic soul and the fruits of his cultivation. Primordial chaos demonic calamity grand technique. He bellowed, his entire body transmuting into a torrent of gray light. Carrying a terrifying power capable of returning heaven and earth to a state of primordial chaos, he lunged toward you. He sought to use his final strength to create a single opening, even a 1 in 10,000 chance for the others. Yet facing this world-shattering strike, you did not even move to evade. You merely tilted your head slightly, a look of faint nostalgia appearing on your face. Chaos demonic calamity. You extended a single finger, nonchalantly tracing a circle in the void before you. I remember that little demon brat who sprouted hair all over. He was quite creative with this technique. It is a pity that his wits were rather dull. He was always obsessed with devouring everything in his path. In the end, I turned him into a floor mat for the entrance of my thatched hut. His fur was actually quite soft to step on. The moment your voice fell, the gray torrent, capable of tearing apart the body of an emperor, rushed forward. As it struck the invisible circle, it hit an unseen wall, and suddenly ground to a halt. Then, under the incredulous gazes of the demon god himself, an airmaster of the Forbidden Zones, a truly bizarre scene unfolded. The swirling gray torrent of chaos began to distort, its violent, destructive power suppressed and contained. Within that tiny circle, it was forcibly bent and reshaped. The gray hues receded, transforming into a brilliant kaleidoscope of color. The aura of destruction vanished, replaced instead by a surging tide of vitality. Fluttering, fluttering. One by one, vibrant butterflies emerged from within the circle. They beat their wings, adorned with flickering motes of chaos, dancing in circles around him. As for the demon god who had sacrificed his very essence, he did not even have the chance to utter a single cry of agony. Along with the disappearance of the gray torrent, his Tao foundation collapsed entirely, his entire cultivation base dissolving into nothingness. He crumpled limply to the ground, stripped of every ounce of combat strength. The peak of Mount Buzhou sank once more into a stillness more profound than death itself. The minds of the remaining Forbidden Zone masters were no longer capable of rational thought. As they stared at those beautiful butterflies, they felt their divine souls, their Tao hearts, and their very perception of reality being pulverized and shredded to pieces in that singular moment. Then all of it was crumpled into a ball and cast into an abyss that defied all logic. A Forbidden Zone master had burned his entire existence to unleash a desperate strike, only to be turned into a swarm of butterflies. What kind of divine ability was this? What kind of Tao technique was this? No, this had transcended the realm of what they could possibly comprehend. Thud. It was unclear who it was, but the first person unable to withstand this extreme mental pressure, his legs gave way, and he knelt on the spot before that figure draped in the shimmering light of 10,000 stars. The starlight surrounding the figure now flickered as dimly as a candle before the wind. The master was trembling, not out of fear, but because he recalled the ancestral teachings of his forebears. The secret testament had once spoken of a taboo, a white robe, a rocking chair, and an indescribably terrifying existence who enjoyed turning experts into bizarre objects. The end of the testament contained only 8 blood-stained characters. Should you encounter him, kneel to preserve your life. He had once dismissed these as the ravings of an ancestor nearing his final breath. Now, he understood, ancestor, you did not deceive me. His act of kneeling served as the first falling domino. Thud. The master of the Samsara Sea, the old man clutching a withered wooden staff, followed suit. Every person remaining, including the Forbidden Zone master who just moments ago had been roaring for the demise of the 3,000 Taoists, prostrated themselves without a moment's hesitation, pressing their foreheads to the ground. They lay prone upon the earth, not daring to even lift their heads, their bodies trembling like leaves in a storm. What of dignity, what of pride, or the reputation of an eternal titan? When faced with an absolute power that crushes all, such principles are nothing more than dust and vapor. Survival. This was the only thought remaining in their minds. At this moment, only Tamthian Dao Nan remained standing alone, not because he refused to kneel, but because he was paralyzed by sheer terror, unable to perform even the simple act of bending his knees. He only opened his mouth, tears streaming down in silence. So this is how you have been amusing yourself all these years, master. You looked at this scene with a hint of boredom. It was truly tiresome. You shook your head, seemingly disappointed by such an outcome. You raised your foot and gently stamped the ground toward the kneeling masters of the Forbidden Zones. It seems the lesson I left for your ancestors was never passed down to you. Forget it. Since you enjoy kneeling so much, then remain that way for eternity. As the sole of your foot descended, an invisible ripple diffused outward, and those masters of the Forbidden Zones, kneeling on the ground, felt their bodies tremble violently, and then, before the terrified gaze of Tamthian Dao Nan, their cultivation and Dao laws were sealed in an instant, their vast supernatural powers and forbidden arts completely locked away. From this day forth, they would only be able to maintain their kneeling posture, forever unable to rise again. In the spanning breath, those masters of the Forbidden Zones, who once terrorized the ages, were transformed into mere stone statues, locked in their kowtowing positions, frozen in place for eternity. Their faces even retained that look of extreme fear and profound regret. You did not spare those sealed figures a single glance. Your eyes fell upon the only living soul remaining on the field. You beckoned to Tamthian Dao Nan to come forward. At that moment, Tamthian Dao Nan felt his heart cease to beat. He watched the white-robed figure gesturing toward him, his legs moving beyond his control, shuffling forward step by step, each stride feeling as though he were trampling upon his own heart. He had no way of knowing what the other party intended to do with him. Is it to face a demon god and transform yourself into a butterfly, or to be like the others, forever sealed in place? Or perhaps a fate even more terrifying, one that you cannot even begin to fathom. At last he arrived before you, standing less than 3 feet away, where he could catch a faint scent, reminiscent of fresh grass lingering upon your person. This fragrance stood in stark, surreal contrast to the Forbidden Zone that had just been rocked by earth-shattering chaos. He lowered his head, daring not to meet your gaze, awaiting the final verdict. Yet the thunderous retribution he anticipated never descended. Instead, you reached out toward his disheveled hair and gently brushed away a fallen leaf that had clung to him unknowingly. Your Tao is quite intriguing, you remarked, your voice remarkably calm. Born from the 3000, seeking to transcend the 3000. Yet in the end you go in circles, forever trapped within. The Santian Taoist shuddered to his core. He jerked his head up, for those words struck like a bolt of divine lightning, shattering the fog that had clouded his heart for 10,000 years. His deepest confusion, the very bottleneck that had shackled his cultivation for a lifetime, had been laid bare with such effortless ease. Senior, his voice trembled, raspy with sudden agitation. I beg you, point out my error. With a heavy thud, he knelt, not out of terror this time, but out of a profound soul-deep yearning for the great Tao. Watching him, you suddenly chuckled. I shall point out your error? You shook your head. I merely find you slightly more interesting than the others. I would prefer you not end up like them, turned into a statue, frozen for eternity, or reduced to nothing more than a swarming insect. The Santian Taoist jolted, instantly sobered from his obsession with the great Tao. He began to kowtow fervently. This junior would not dare. This junior only seeks to serve by your side, to sweep the floors and light the incense. I only ask to keep my life to serve you. You pursed your lips, a look of disdain appearing on your face. You are too weak. You lack even the qualifications to serve as fertilizer for the plants in my garden. The Santian Taoist's face turned ashen. Yet you shifted your tone. However, I do have a need for someone to run errands here. A flicker of hope ignited once more in the eyes of the Santian Taoist. Senior, please, give your orders. Whether it be climbing a mountain of blades or plunging into a sea of fire, this junior would not refuse even at the cost of 10,000 deaths. You stretched and let out a yawn, having apparently lost all interest in this. Go back and tell those who have not yet been wiped out, those who are currently surviving or hiding in some dark corner feigning death. Tell them to conduct themselves with restraint from now on. This world is far too noisy, you said, waving your hand, as if brushing away a common fly begone. And the next moment, Santian Doran felt a force beyond resistance envelop him. The world before his eyes spun violently. By the time he regained consciousness, he found he had been cast out of Mount Buzhou, returning to the skies of the Donghuang continent. Beneath his feet lay all living beings, and behind him, the Taoist companions who had been breathing moments ago were now frozen into eternal statues. In his mind, only those calm yet incomparably domineering words remained. This world is far too noisy. He finally understood that the Supreme Entity did not merely intend to cripple a few individuals, nor was he concerned with sealing a few forbidden zones. What he demanded was absolute silence for the entire world. He, Santian Doran, would become the vessel to carry the will of this supreme existence, declaring to the entire world the descent of a new era, an era of total silent stagnation. Having completed all this, you reverted to your previous, indifferent demeanor. You looked around, observing how the primordial forbidden zone had been transformed. Within 100 miles of your thatched hut, ethereal immortal mist drifted, teeming with vitality. It was truly a blessed land of the immortals. Yet beyond this, there were only kneeling statues and desolate pitch-black earth. On one side life, on the other death. The boundary was stark, yet utterly discordant. You frowned, appearing quite dissatisfied with the unsightly landscape manifesting in your backyard. You reached out toward the statues and the distant reaches of the forbidden zone, wiping your hand gently, as if clearing dust from a tarnished mirror. The void rippled like the surface of a disturbed pool. Those statues, once the lifelike masters of the forbidden zones, felt their seals dissolved silently under that gentle wipe. They were returned to their respective forbidden realms. Yet, for all eternity, they were forbidden from stepping out even half a pace, and all karmic ties associated with their existence were thoroughly erased. Following this, the ripples spread across the entire primordial forbidden zone, that land once known as the Death Zone. The withered, 10,000-year-old ancient tree there, the dried-up riverbed, covered in a web of deep fissures, and every desolate, silent landscape beneath the sweep of these ripples, underwent a cataclysmic transformation. Sprouts surged forth, covering every inch of the land at a speed visible to the naked eye. Withered wood meeting the spring, branches burst into bloom, radiating a glory unseen for a myriad of years. Within the dry riverbed, spring water bubbled up and converged into a stream. The babbling brook eventually swelled into a river of life, flowing incessantly, coursing through the entirety of the forbidden zone. In a mere moment, this first forbidden land of primordial origin, a place that once made even great emperors turn pale, vanished completely, replaced by a vast supreme divine land, overflowing with vitality, where the spiritual essence was so dense it refused to dissipate. This is how it should be. You nodded in satisfaction, settled back into your rocking chair, and closed your eyes comfortably. Finally, the world was at peace. However, the moment you closed your eyes, a sudden anomaly gripped the entire world. Whether it was the newly reformed divine land or the 9 heavens and 10 earths, the 4 seas and 8 desolations all trembled violently. Across the firmament, where the sky had been clear for 10,000 miles, a rift tore open without the slightest warning. It was not a spatial crack, but a violet scar that seemed etched into the very origin of the world. That violet wound stretched across the horizon. Its emergence was as abrupt as it was unreasonable. At first, it was merely a thin line, but immediately it began to spread wildly toward both ends with an unstoppable momentum, tearing the entire sky into two halves in the blink of an eye. A pressure beyond the power of language to describe poured forth from that violet wound. It was not the pressure of raw strength, nor the pressure of the divine soul, but the pressure of the laws themselves, as if the order of the entire world had been completely overturned in that instant. The sunlight vanished, replaced by a bizarre, crimson-violet glow, hovering between day and night, enveloping the entire world. Sweest, the clouds dispersed, and time itself seemed to turn sluggish. Every living soul, be it the ancestor secluded in the deepest mountain, the child who had just set foot upon the path of cultivation, or the commoner tilling their field, all stopped what they were doing at that very moment, as if by fate. They looked up, their faces etched with confusion and terror, staring toward that blinding violet scar upon the sky. A primal fear, born from the very instinct of survival, gripped the hearts of everyone present. The sky was collapsing. As Dong Huang had only just departed from Mount Buzhou, Taoist Sanqian gazed up at the apocalyptic scene unfolding above, and his newly forged Tao heart nearly shattered once more. What on earth is this? Old Seventh Qing muttered. Could it be that the purge orchestrated by that existence has not yet concluded? No, that is not right. He could sense that this group pressure was fundamentally different from the indifferent transcendent aura that viewed all living things as nothing. This pressure was vast and unfeeling, overflowing with a will of judgment and destruction. The target of this malice was not the common masses. It was searching, locking onto a single existence that the entire world found intolerable. A flash of insight struck Taoist Sanjian's mind, and he violently turned his gaze toward the direction of the primordial forbidden zone. The blood drained from his face. To be an existence that even the heavens could not tolerate. Who else could it be but that person? Before the thatched cottage, you slowly opened your eyes. You did not look at the sky, but merely lowered your head to glance at the small blade of grass you had planted. On that small blade of grass, the newly sprouted chaos leaf was trembling ever so slightly. At the center of the leaf, that mysterious rune emitted a faint light, resonating from afar with the violet scar upon the sky. So it was you causing this trouble. You extended a finger and lightly flicked the chaos leaf, your tone carrying a hint of reproach, yet lingering with a sense of unexpected intrigue. You raised your head, finally casting your gaze toward the heavens, looking at that violet wound that seemed to be tearing the world asunder. Upon your face, which had been as calm as an ancient stagnant well for tens of thousands of years, a genuine emotion finally appeared. It was not fear, nor was it gravity, but rather a flicker of excitement after being idle for far too long, finally having found something to do. Sweep, you muttered to the heavens, remarking that you had assumed it had perished long ago. Your words seemed to strike a nerve with that supreme transcendent entity. The violet rift in the firmament suddenly shuddered as an infinite surge of purple lightning coalesced within the depths of the wound. This was no ordinary thunderstorm. It was the lightning of heavenly punishment, forged from the purest laws of destruction. Even a single strand of that energy would suffice to utterly erase a great emperor and his Tao fruit from the river of time. The entire world trembled before this display of power. Yet, you merely spared it a glance before shaking your head in disinterest. The same old trick. There is nothing new here. You seem to hold this level of heavenly punishment in profound contempt. Just as you prepared to lie back down and continue your slumber, a new anomaly manifested in the sky. That roiling sea of violet lightning suddenly fell silent. Then chains of laws, crafted entirely from the essence of divine retribution, descended from the violet rift. They intertwined and wove themselves together, coalescing in mid-air. Finally, under the horrified gaze of every living soul in the world, they took the shape of a massive hand. A colossal hand boundless in scale, formed entirely from purple lightning and the laws of annihilation. Its form, the lines of the knuckles and the whorls of the palm were identical to your own. The heavenly Tao had chosen not to strike with primordial lightning. Instead, it mimicked you, manifesting a replica of your own hand, intending to judge you by your own methods. A taste of your own medicine. You looked at the violet hand of yourself in the sky and were momentarily stunned. You slowly raised your right hand, comparing it to the giant limb above, and after a long moment, you laughed. It was a hearty, genuine laugh that resonated from the depths of your soul. You stood up from your rocking chair and stretched, your joints emitting a crisp, rhythmic cracking sound. For the first time in 10,000 years, a spark of genuine battle intent ignited in your eyes. At last, there was something worth doing. High above, the giant hand, coalesced from pure destructive law and violet punishment, began to descend. Before it even made contact, the great Tao laws of the entire world began to crumble in chaos. The mountains and rivers lost their color, and the sun and moon grew dim, as if the very existence of this hand was the ultimate negation of this world. On the East Desolation continent, the sage of 3,000 Taos collapsed weakly to the ground. The 3,000 great Taos he had spent a lifetime cultivating, to his perception, now flickered like a candle in a gale, feeble, fragile, and on the verge of being extinguished at any moment. The hand of heaven. Using the Tao to punish the Tao, he whispered, his face filled with utter despair. This is the most extreme execution method of the heavenly Tao. He no longer relied on brute force, but instead mirrored the techniques of that very existence, using his own form to negate the very logic of his existence. This was a decree of death originating from the fundamental laws of the world. It could neither be parried nor evaded. It is finished. This time it is truly finished. Yet, before the thatched hut, the look of interest on the face of the one being judged began to vanish at a pace visible to the naked eye. Imitation of my technique is clumsy. You curled your lip. Your expression was that of a supreme grandmaster, looking upon a crude imitation crafted by a 3-year-old out of mud, to the point where you did not even harbor the desire to critique it. Facing the giant violet palm capable of crushing the ages, that grand emperor of slaughter did not even bother to assume a defensive stance. You merely raised your right hand slowly, your 5 fingers spread, palm facing upward, a motion so simple it could not be simpler, as if you were merely waiting to catch the falling rain. In the next moment, the hand of heavenly punishment descended with a roar. There was no earth-shattering echo, nor was there a blinding radiance caused by the collision of laws. The anticipated scene of an apocalyptic collapse did not occur at all. Under the watchful eyes of the 3,000 Taoists, and under the gaze of every ancient existence spying through secret arts, their eyes widened to the point of nearly bursting from their sockets. That colossal hand of heavenly punishment, forged from endless destructive lightning, upon touching your palm, seemed like a flood finding its outlet. No, it was not merely an outlet, it was a return to its source. The endless violet lightning of the heavenly punishment, those destructive laws capable of vaporizing the earth in a heartbeat, were at this moment as docile as a house cat. They coursed along your hand, transforming into a surging torrent of violet light that poured into your body. The entire process was eerily silent. You stood there, not even shifting your feet by an inch. You were like a bottomless black hole, greedily and comfortably taking the heavenly punishment, enough to destroy the world 1,000 times over, treating it like a light dessert after a meal, swallowing it down entirely, gulp after gulp. A bit pungent, you remarked, smacking your lips. It seems you hold a rather low opinion of this dessert. It contains far too many impurities, and lacks the proper refinement. It appears that your life over these past years has not been particularly fruitful. You speak as if conversing with an old acquaintance. Your tone remains calm, even carrying a hint of a sermon. The violet world scar in the sky seems to comprehend your mockery. It trembles violently, and an even more berserk furious will erupts from the depths of the wound. The torrential flood of lightning descending suddenly accelerates, as if attempting to overwhelm you with sheer power until you are consumed. So you intend to fight back? You finally lose a sliver of your patience. You raise your remaining hand, reaching out to grasp the violet wound in the heavens. Since there is giving, there must be receiving. Try a taste of my power as well. A suction force of entirely opposite nature erupts from the palm of your hand, exploding with an intensity 1,000, nay, 10,000 times faster than the devouring speed of the heavenly tribulation. The violet lightning flood connecting the heavens and the earth is torn asunder in an instant. Not only that, but the power within your body flows backward along that invisible connection, biting back at the violet world scar. In an instant, the entire world witnesses a truly bizarre spectacle. The violet wound in the sky is no longer the source of the descending tribulation. Instead, it is transformed into a gaping, giant orifice. The world's primal energy, the spiritual veins of mountains and rivers, the very essence of the great Tao, and every visible and invisible force of all things, at this very moment, are forcibly extracted by an irresistible tyrannical power, turning into a surging torrent that flows through the violet wound and pours into your body. You are devouring this world. The heavenly tribulation has become your sustenance, and the judgment of heaven has transformed into your gluttonous feast. You let out a satisfied burp, a faint trace of contentment appearing on your face. This is barely acceptable, you muse, watching the violet wound in the sky grow increasingly dim as its energy is forcibly drained, to the point where it begins to show signs of instability. You finally nod in satisfaction. This is what one calls a proper meal. Taoist Santian is completely paralyzed. He stares at the figure who treats the heavenly tribulation as a meal, and the world as food. So this is how one can toy with the heavenly tribulation. It turns out that undergoing the tribulation is literally akin to eating a meal. The old man felt as though his tens of thousands of years of cultivation had been in vain, wasted on a dog, and even a dog would not have been as unreasonable as him. At this moment, he suddenly felt that those fellow Taoists, who remained sealed away for eternity, might actually be experiencing a form of happiness. At the very least, they do not have to be like him, witnessing a scene capable of shattering the mental state of any practitioner of the Tao. This is no longer merely a display of strength. This is the trampling of rules and the crushing of truth itself. He is the law. He is the truth. Faced with your retaliation, That world scar hanging high above the 9 heavens revealed, for the first time, an emotion known as fear. It was recoiling, trembling, desperate to close itself, desperate to flee. The existence it had locked onto and deemed a heresy, the one it sought to eradicate, was fundamentally an incomprehensible monster. The judgment lightning it unleashed became nothing more than a tonic for the other party. The world barrier it had torn open became a straw for its opponent to feast through. If this continues, the entire world will be drained dry by you. The violet wound stopped leaking energy and instead began to gather it with frantic intensity. Every remaining ounce of heavenly tribulation power, every shred of world essence that could be mobilized, was gathered together in this moment without reservation. It intended to launch a final, most devastating counterstrike. This time, it would no longer merely mimic your hand. Lightning and laws twisted and intertwined, reconstructing themselves at the center of the wound. Gradually, a vague humanoid outline appeared within the perception of everyone present. It was a being that defied all linguistic description. He possessed no facial features and no flesh. His entire form was composed of the purest order runes and chains of luminescent laws. He stood there silently, appearing as the concrete embodiment of the entire world. His existence was the will of heaven and earth. His arrival was the final judgment. The incarnation of the heavenly Tao. The lips of the Santian Taoist cracked, his voice raspy to the point of agony. According to legends, only when a world faces complete cycle of life and death, or when a taboo creature is born that exceeds the limits of the world, will the heavenly Tao condense its own incarnation to quell the chaos and restore order, the purging of the universe. He had once assumed this was merely mythology, a fabrication written in ancient texts, yet he never expected to witness such a myth descend with his own eyes. Upon appearing, this heavenly Tao incarnation made no aggressive moves. He merely glanced at you. That gaze carried no emotion, no intent, only the purest manifestation of law. In this instant, the void surrounding you began to crumble away piece by piece, not destroyed by sheer force, but fundamentally erased at a conceptual level, as if that fragment of space had never existed in the first place. This is the authority of the heavenly Tao. He can define existence. Naturally, he can also define non-existence. He intends to excise you and the very fabric of time and space you occupy from the river of time of this entire world. Yet facing this ontological strike, a blow that could be considered unsolvable, you did not even bother to furrow your brow. You even took the moment to adjust the corner of your robe, ruffled by the wind. Finally, you have decided to show your face. You looked up toward the manifestation of the heavenly Tao, which radiated boundless brilliance, your expression carrying a sense of weary helplessness, much like an aged father gazing at a wayward child. Have you played enough? Something I molded myself, now attempting to turn against its creator. Your words caused the mind of the sage of 3,000 Taos to hum, nearly shattering on the spot. What did that mean? Judging by this tone, could it be that even this heavenly Tao was... The thought was too insane, too reality-bending. The sage of 3,000 Taos dared not contemplate it any further. The manifestation of the heavenly Tao seemed thoroughly enraged by these blasphemous words. His form, constructed of pure light, trembled violently as a more primal, more absolute force of destruction locked onto you. The laws of the entire world resonated in that moment, declaring, "This person does not exist. You truly do not listen," you sighed, finally raising your hand. You did not unleash any earth-shattering divine ability, nor did you summon any cataclysmic power to annihilate the heavens. You merely extended a single finger toward the arrogant and peerless manifestation of the heavenly Tao, that entity representing the supreme will of the entire world, and gently tapped the air, uttering "dissipate." You spoke only one word, a word so calm it could not be any calmer. Following this, the manifestation of the heavenly Tao, condensed from infinite laws and the world's own essence, that final arbiter capable of driving even a great emperor to despair, simply froze, his body glowing with infinite radiance, and began to disintegrate inch by inch, starting from where your finger touched him. The runes of order that composed his form, the shackles of law that shimmered with primal light, much like building blocks forced apart by an invisible hand, layer by layer, inch by inch, it was peeled away from his body, shattering into the void, regressing into the most primitive essence of heaven and earth. The entire process occurred in complete, haunting silence, without struggle or resistance, as if your word of dissipate were an absolute law that transcended the heavenly Tao itself. With a single word, all laws are unraveled. Under the witness of every living soul across the world, that manifestation of the heavenly Tao, the representative of the world's supreme will, within the span of just a few short breaths, was thoroughly shattered and dissipated, leaving not a trace behind, as if it had never existed at all. High in the firmament, the savage violet rift emitted a sound like a mournful wail the very moment the heavenly Tao manifestation vanished. Then, at a speed exponentially faster than when it first appeared, it closed and vanished in a frenzy, as if it had witnessed something so terrifying that it fled for its very life. A moment later, the sky returned to its pristine clarity, stretching for 10,000 miles without a single cloud. Sunlight bathed the earth once more. The wind began to stir, and time resumed its normal course. if not for the lingering aura of destruction in the air that still made hearts race with dread. If not for having witnessed the events with their own eyes, everyone would have dismissed it all as an utterly absurd nightmare. You withdrew your finger, your expression bland and indifferent. It was over already, and you had hoped it would be more entertaining. You shook your head, seemingly deeply disappointed and bored by the meager strength of this final boss. You turned around, preparing to return to your thatched hut to resume your slumber. This world remains as tedious as ever. Dao Sunqian stared blankly at the patch of sky that had regained its peace, then shifted his gaze to your retreating white-clad figure. His body and soul were trembling violently, beyond his control. Finally, he understood everything. Finally, he understood why he had revered this young man in white as his master in the path of Tao. Finally, he understood why even the heavenly Tao could do nothing against you. It is because you are the origin of the Tao. You are the one who created the Tao. You define the rules, and you are the one who granted the heavenly Tao is nothing more than a tool you forged on a whim during moments of boredom to sustain the world's operation. Yet today, this tool dared to defy its master, only to be struck back into its true form by a mere gesture from its creator. Having realized the gravity of all this, the final shred of fear within the heart of the sage of 3,000 Taos dissipated like mist. In its place emerged a sense of devotion and fervor, rising from the depths of his soul, unlike anything he had ever felt before. He was no longer the lofty master of the Forbidden Zone who had reigned for countless eons. He was now but the lowliest of seekers, fortunate enough to catch a fleeting glimpse of the ultimate truth. Thud, his knees struck the air with a heavy force, his forehead pressed firmly against the void before him, performing the supreme ritual of a cultivator toward the origin of the great Tao, prostrating himself completely. He said nothing, nor did he dare to speak. In the presence of the true Tao, all language is pale, and all words are blasphemy. Only the most absolute submission, the most pious veneration, could express the awe surging like a raging tide within his heart. At this moment, his movement seemed to act as a signal that rippled across the 9 heavens and 10 earths, the 4 seas, the 8 desolations, the eastern wilds, the southern ranges, the western desert, the northern plains, and the central continent. No matter which sacred hall, or which hidden depths of an ancient clan, the old monsters who had lived for countless tens of thousands of years, those who deemed themselves to have seen through the vanity of the mortal world, whose hearts were as calm as stagnant water, all surged forth from their secluded cultivation. They stared at the empty patch of sky, yet it still seemed to linger with that supreme divine might, their faces turning deathly pale, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. Without hesitation, without delay, and without a single moment of resistance, they all turned toward the Tichu Forbidden Zone, kneeling and refusing to rise. It was not just them. The myriad demon grottos of the demon race, the abyssal demon wells of the devil race, within those absolute forbidden lands that once rivaled the sacred zones, where other supreme existences lay in deep slumber, the effects were felt. A golden ancient dragon, dormant for 1,000,000 years, opened eyes as vast as mountain peaks. Then it bowed the proud head it had carried through countless eras. An ancient demon lord, having just awakened from a pool of blood, retracted a demonic aura capable of staining the heavens black, and reverently bent his knees. Next came the holy lords, imperial sovereigns, grand masters of the sects, and formidable rogue cultivators. Every cultivator whose cultivation had reached the saint realm or higher felt at this very moment a primal urge to submit, originating from their very bloodlines, from their spirits, and from the essence of the great Tao itself. They stepped out of their meditation caves, emerged from their palaces, and left their sanctuaries, all kneeling toward the same direction. This wave continued to cascade downward, to the kings, the nobility, the common cultivators, the martial artists, and finally the mortals. Farmers tilling the fields halted their plows, and vendors in the marketplace set down their wares. Emperors deep within their royal courts rose from their golden thrones. They did not know what had transpired, nor did they understand why their bodies defied their own control to perform such an act. Acting purely on instinct, they looked toward that distant horizon, dropped to both knees, and bowed their heads in profound reverence. At this moment, the entire world fell into a deathly silence. Across the 9 heavens and 10 lands, the 4 seas and 8 desolates, hundreds of millions of living beings, regardless of whether they were human, demon, devil, ghost, or deity, regardless of their cultivation level, and regardless of their status, all knelt in submission toward the same direction. This was not a command, yet it carried more weight than any decree. This was not a mere miracle, for it surpassed the nature of all miracles. This was an absolute surrender to the Creator, etched deep into the genetic code of every living thing. Before your thatched hut, you had just reached your rocking chair, preparing to lie down, when you suddenly sensed something. Your movements froze, and you looked around your surroundings with a trace of bewilderment. Why is everyone kneeling? Your face revealed a flicker of confusion and annoyance. Didn't they just finish kneeling a moment ago? Are they still at it? You felt that your garden, the one place you had struggled to keep quiet, had been sullied by these uninvited guests. You heaved a sigh and shook your head. How troublesome. You paid no heed to the wave of prostration sweeping across the world, settled back into your rocking chair, and effortlessly pulled a plantain leaf over your face. Out of sight, out of mind, the world was finally at peace again. You closed your eyes, preparing to resume the afternoon nap that had been interrupted far too many times. However, at the very moment your consciousness began to drift away, the small, seemingly unremarkable blade of grass beside you, at the apex sat that newly born leaf of chaos, which suddenly, without the presence of a breeze, began to sway ever so gently. At the center of the leaf, the mysterious rune, having dimmed after drawing down the heavenly tribulation, flickered with light once more. Immediately thereafter, right beside that rune, a new mark, even more ancient, and far more intricate, accompanied by a faint wisp of chaotic energy so subtle it was nearly imperceptible, began to slowly coalesce into form. You lie upon your rocking chair, yet the banana leaf draped over your face proves unable to grant you a peaceful slumber. You pay no mind to the living beings kneeling outside like waves of grain, for your focus is entirely consumed by the small blade of grass beside you. This newly manifested mark, more ancient and complex than the original chaotic rune, like a star newly birthed into existence, rotates slowly before your eyes. It possesses no aggressive intent, nor does it emit any startling fluctuations of energy, yet it represents a new character, a novelty that feels foreign even to you. Across these long, arduous ages that defy the measurement of time, this new character had long since vanished from your memory. You extend a finger, gently brushing against that entirely new mark. The moment your fingertip makes contact, your consciousness is cast into an endless ocean, woven from countless strands of silk. Each strand represents a supreme law of heaven and earth. You behold the growth trajectories of all things. You witness the cycle of reincarnation and the extinction of stars. You observe the flowing veins of the world, all of which were woven by your own hands, familiar yet mundane. But very soon you discover the origin of that new mark at the very depths of this ocean of laws. It is not a strand of silk, but a lock, a colossal rusted bronze bone lock, obstructing the end of all laws. What it secures is a gateway leading to a higher realm, leading to the Emperor realm. The existence of this lock forces every branch of law, upon reaching this gate, to reluctantly deviate and flow around it. Throughout countless years, no matter how brilliant or talented the living beings of the myriad worlds have been, all of them could only stand before this gate, gazing upon the sea and sighing in lament. They spent their entire lives merely circling within this sealed domain. Remembering now, you draw back your finger, an expression of sudden realization dawning upon your face. You recall on an exceedingly distant and idle afternoon. Because you did not want your garden to be marred by the constant trampling of too many powerhouses, you had casually set a restriction. At that time, you felt that living beings below the Emperor realm were already powerful enough, and sufficiently interesting. To make matters any grander would only disturb your slumber. As for how many aspirations of future generations this restriction would sever, you had not given it a single thought back then, much like one would not concern themselves with whether a closed door obstructs the path of a few ants. Is that not so? Yet now, you find it too quiet. You offer a self-deprecating smile and rise from your rocking chair. Having just felt the world was too noisy, you personally erased a group of the loudest, most prominent figures. Now, you feel the world has fallen into the opposite extreme, drowned in silence, without a single soul capable of offering a challenge, without anyone capable of bringing even the slightest surprise. Even the heavenly Tao toy you molded with your own hands is so fragile it cannot withstand a single blow. If this continues, this garden is bound to become desolate. Very well, let it be opened. You gaze at the invisible gate suspended in the void, visible only to you, and the massive bronze lock upon it, making your decision, so that no further trivialities may arise hereafter. You raise your hand and slowly clench it into a fist. You do not channel any of the world's primordial energy, nor do you mobilize any laws of the universe. It is merely a pure, simple physical motion, after which you cast a single punch. This punch is not aimed in any direction, nor is it targeted at any specific objective. What it strikes is the concept itself, the eternal law of confinement that you set with your own hands. On the East Desolate Continent, Taoist Sanqian remains in a prone position, immersed in endless reverence toward the Tao origin. Suddenly, a crack, a tiny yet incredibly distinct sound of shattering resonates deep within his soul. No, not just him, in this very moment, across the 9 heavens, the 10 earths, and the 4 seas and 8 desolations. Every ancient entity whose cultivation had reached the peak of the Emperor realm, those who had brushed against that invisible barrier, heard this sound. The sound was like shackles snapping, like a cage shattering into pieces. Immediately following, a vast and entirely new world, boundless and unprecedented, suddenly expanded within their perception. The gateway to the Emperor realm, which had plagued them for a lifetime and left them in despair for countless ages, had finally swung wide open. An ancient patriarch of a holy land, withered and meditating, suddenly snapped his eyes open. A brilliance never before seen erupted from his cloudy pupils. He could feel the severed path had finally been reconnected. In the depths of a demonic abyss, a slumbering demon lord unleashed a crazed roar that shook the heavens and the earth. The realm he had pursued his entire life was no longer a flower in the mirror or a moon in the water, an unattainable illusion. In countless corners of the world, countless ancient beings were plunged into a state of ecstasy and utter disbelief. They did not know what had occurred, but they understood that a brand new golden age, an era where one could finally ascend to the throne of an emperor, had arrived. Yet, the one who had initiated all of this merely clapped his hands, as if brushing away a bit of dust. You glanced at that small blade of grass, and alongside the shattering of the bronze lock, the newly formed intricate seal lost its light, slowly dissipating as if it had never existed at all. It is peaceful now. You nodded in satisfaction, feeling that the world had finally restored the order it was meant to have. However, just as you were about to lie down once more, you paused. You discovered that breaking this lock had apparently triggered something at a much deeper level. The very foundation of the world, due to the sudden opening of this door, had begun to tremble with instability. It was extremely faint, much like a house that had suddenly had its load-bearing wall removed. Though it had not yet collapsed, there was now a hidden, underlying danger. How troublesome. You furrowed your brow. It seemed that merely opening the door would not suffice. You would need to reinforce the entire foundation as well. Reinforcing the foundation was not a difficult task for you, but you were tired of using the old patchwork methods. Treating only the head when the head hurts, or the foot when the foot hurts. In the end, it would only lead to new problems. Addressing the symptoms, rather than the root cause. You shook your head, deciding to use a more thorough approach, a one-time effort for eternal ease. You walked toward the river of life, which had just transformed from the previously dried-up riverbed. The river water is crystal clear, murmuring softly, containing within it the purest essence of life. Yet, what you perceive is not merely this river, but rather, through its surface you see another river surging and roaring, spanning the past, the present, and the future. The river of time. That river is invisible and intangible. Only you can behold it, only you can touch it. You reach out your hand and stir the waters slightly, and for a fleeting moment, the flow of the entire world grinds to a halt. A bit chaotic, you assess. The river of time is riddled with countless eddies and undercurrents, remnants of your own capricious actions across the vast span of eons. For instance, when you crushed a star on a whim, a fold appeared in the fabric of time within that region. When you created a race on a passing impulse, a new tributary branched out into the long river. You erased the incarnation of the heavenly Tao, further stirring up violent waves and turbulent swells downstream. Ordinarily, these anomalies would be of no consequence. But now that you have unlocked the gateway to the Emperor Realm, it is akin to tearing a massive aperture into this river. These undercurrents and whirlpools have now become lethal perils, sufficient to shatter the vessel and claim the life of anyone attempting to cross into the Emperor Realm. Since that is the case, you remove your footwear. With bare feet, you take a single step, wading directly into the invisible roaring torrent of the river of time. In that case, let us walk it from the beginning to the end. The moment you enter the river, your figure begins to shimmer and fade into ethereal distortion. You are walking against the current, traveling from the present back toward the past. Taoist Sanqian suddenly raises his head. Upon his paralyzed feet for the very first time, a look of genuine terror emerges. Within his perception, your silhouette is receding in a manner that defies all comprehension. He witnesses you shatter the incarnation of the heavenly Tao with a single finger. He witnesses you consume the sea of heavenly punishment lightning. He witnesses you turn the masters of the forbidden lands into stone statues. And he witnesses ancient scenes even further back, ones he has never laid eyes upon before. Each step you take backward is a segment of history dusted off. One step covers 10,000 years, one step spans an entire epoch. You pass through the age of immortals, through the age of mythology, and through the primordial era, even more desolate and chaotic. Like a leisurely traveler, examining the path one has walked, you see yourself in a realm of nothingness, igniting the first sun. You find the light of that sun to be somewhat dazzling. So with a casual wave of your hand, you create the moon and the night. You see yourself sowing a seed within the chaos, a seed that would eventually grow into the world tree, supporting the entirety of existence. Seeing that the world feels too barren, you mold figures from earth and breathe life into them, and thus the first living beings are born. You see savage, chaotic demons invading from outside the world, seeking to devour this garden you call home. You find them to be a mere nuisance. With a single strike, you crush the demons into cosmic dust. Casually use the remaining essence to establish the heavenly Tao, maintaining the world's order. Scene after scene, achievement after achievement. These acts of creation are worthy of being etched into any epic, becoming immortal myths. Yet from your perspective, these were merely pastimes to kill time when bored. As you walk and tidy your domain, you see an unsightly vortex in the river of time. You reach out and smooth it away. You see a strand of karma twisted too tightly, forming a fatal knot. You effortlessly unravel it. You do not alter history, you merely refine it. taking the creases left behind by your fleeting whims, smoothing out every jagged edge, making the entire river of time flow seamlessly, calm and stable as never before. You walk from the world's present, journeying all the way to the world's origin, to the place of absolute nothingness, where nothing has yet begun, where you exist in solitude. Then you turn around from that primordial point and journey downstream toward the present. This time you move with great speed. The river of time beneath your feet is as docile as a small brook. As your silhouette transforms from illusion back into a tangible form on the banks of the river of life, the entire world undergoes a metamorphosis. The spiritual energy between heaven and earth becomes purer, the laws of the great Tao become more distinct, and every living soul feels their spirit cleansed, as if washed by a cool, clear spring, feeling enlightened as never before. The path leading to the Emperor Realm is no longer a perilous, narrow bridge, but a vast, smooth, and expansive boulevard. By using one's own power to reconstruct the foundations of the entire world, the true creation of this realm was finally accomplished. Upon completing all these tasks, you let out a long, weary sigh. Surely it is finally time to rest in peace. You turn and head toward your thatched hut and rocking chair. The world has been cleansed and set in order. In the years to come, whether it be the golden age of the great world or the era of the rise of the myriad emperors, it shall have nothing to do with you. It will be bustling and chaotic, but you desire only tranquility. As you walk before the thatched hut, the entire world seems to be cheering for you. The great Tao sings in harmony, heaven grants auspicious rain and dew, the earth produces golden lotuses, and countless arcane runes and laws swirl around you, as if bowing to their sovereign. Across the 9 heavens and 10 lands, all ancient existences that have awakened feel the clear transformation of the world. They understand that all of this is a gift from that supreme existence, that this existence has personally paved the path forward for all seekers of the Tao throughout the ages. Suddenly, the entire world falls into a new wave of prostration, even more devout and even more fervent. We offer our thanks for the Tao ancestors' grace. Taoist Santian cries out with teary eyes, voicing the deepest sentiments of every cultivator. However, in response to all of this, you merely wave your hand with waning patience, and the runes and laws surrounding you fall into instant silence, obediently receding back into the heavens and earth. The strange phenomena in the sky vanish without a trace, and the world returns to its normal state. You glance at Taoist Santian, who is kneeling on the ground, along with the countless figures prostrating themselves across the world, and to your senses, it is incredibly noisy. You pout, finally reaching the side of your rocking chair. This time you do not rush to lie down. You stand in place for a moment in silence, contemplating a question. Having completed all these deeds, having reconstructed the foundations of the world and opened the path to becoming an emperor, what about yourself? What realm are you actually in? This is a question you have never considered before, because you are simply who you are. No realm is needed to define you, but now you feel that perhaps you should create a title for yourself. Otherwise, in this golden age where the various emperors are about to rise in succession, for someone like you, who is not even an emperor, would it not be a great loss of face? Although you fundamentally do not care for prestige, you feel that it would be more harmonious, much like a king who must always wear a crown upon his head, even if that crown serves as nothing more than mere decoration. Thus you make a decision. You desire to become an emperor. The moment this thought sparks within your heart, the great Tao laws of the entire world begin to surge violently. Across the firmament, hundreds of millions of rays of divine light descend, and endless auspicious vapors and clouds converge, seeking to pave a supreme celestial path for you to ascend to the throne of the great emperor, the heavenly Tao. This newly reconfigured tool is utilizing its highest order of ceremony to welcome its master's enthronement. This is validation. This is a coronation. Any cultivator who could receive even a single sliver of that divine light would be enough to instantly attain a perfect saintly Tao fruit. Yet you merely glance at the divine light filling the sky, then frown, thinking, who asked you to meddle in these affairs? You reach out your hand toward the heavens and press down lightly. In the following instant, all the divine light, all the auspicious vapors, and the entire chorus of the great Tao suddenly fall silent, as if forced to a standstill by an invisible hand pressing a button. A pause. You do not require the recognition of the heavenly Tao. You require the world's coronation even less. Your so-called path to becoming an emperor is not to follow the grand road it has paved for you, but rather, you lift your foot and lightly stamp upon the ground, simply stepping down in an entirely ordinary fashion. Yet the emperor realm of the entire world, that supreme domain at the very end of the sea of laws, seems to receive an irresistible summons. It acts with humility, descending from those lofty clouds above. It does not merge into your body, but instead, that rocking chair, that small blade of grass, and this entire 100-mile expanse of immortal paradise were all enveloped within. From this moment forth, you are the imperial realm, and the imperial realm is you alone. Having accomplished all of this, you finally feel a sense of completeness. The entire world in your eyes has become harmonious as never before. Content you lie back upon the rocking chair, pulling a plantain leaf over your face. This time perhaps, nothing will come to disturb you again. Your consciousness slowly sinks, preparing to enter a long-awaited, tranquil slumber. At this very moment, the small blade of grass beside you, that seemingly ordinary blade of grass, which has witnessed the birth of chaos, witnessed the rise and fall of the heavenly Tao, and witnessed the restructuring of that world. Atop its peak, that singular leaf of chaos sways gently, and then amidst a soft ethereal radiance, a small nine-colored flower slowly blooms from the center of the leaf. The moment the flower opens, a pure, soul-penetrating fragrance that defies description drifts into your nostrils. That scent carries the joy of Genesis, the stillness of eternity, and absolute tranquility. Your breathing becomes deep and steady. This time, you have truly drifted into sleep. The world has finally, completely, attained peace.